Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. If you're watching today on the stream, we are live in the wholesaling studio powered by RumbleOn.com. It's been a while since we've been in here. Ian, when's the last time I was here?
I have no idea.
I have never seen you in this building.
Ever?
Ever.
Yeah, I was
First
like, what
time I
year
met
is
you,
it?
we went to lunch.
That's
and
right.
you did the
then
show
you
from
were
your
back in my
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen you. You look wonderful in this lighting, might I add.
Okay, yes. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we are here today. I'll be in Tampa tonight, Titans and Bucks practicing. And so I'm trying to make sure that this is right and try to get this little mic stand out of my face.
It's been a minute.
But it's just different. And my seat that's right here, right here in the middle is where I used to always sit. That thing doesn't even work. That thing, I was going to click that button and it doesn't. So anywho, but I want to start the show on this. First of all, everyone doing okay today?
Doing great.
Good. So Tim Tebow gets released by the Jags. And I don't know how you guys feel about this. You guys can feel about it however you want. But I have three separate feelings. The first is Tebow. Like, dude, give it up. And I don't mean that in the nice way. I mean that in the, we've had enough of your ridiculous attempts to try to become a pro athlete. Like, it's over, bud.
I think based off of his tweet today, it sounds like he's done. Like, if he wants to go to a practice squad, like, he can.
I don't even want to give him the opportunity to reconsider.
But his tweet today made it seem like it was very finite. He's done.
I mean, dude, give it up. I mean, he has turned into Air Bud. Like, remember the movie where the Golden Retriever plays basketball? Disney came out with it when I was a kid. And then all of a sudden, Disney started coming out with, like, subsequent, like, Air Bud movies. There was an Air Bud football movie. There was an Air Bud volleyball movie. There was an Air Bud baseball movie, Air Bud the Seventh Inning Fetch. And it went right to DVD. That's what Tim Tebow has become. And now...
Why do you know so much about Air Bud?
I like the first Air Bud. But now it's become to the point where with Tebow, we'll never really talk about the great player he was at Florida. Like when it comes to Johnny Manziel, we'll talk about the partying and the crazy, but we'll all remember the great player he was at Texas A&M. We'll always remember that. With Tebow, we're going to remember the circus act of his pro career just as much as we're going to remember what he was in college. Like, we'll remember that he tried to play baseball and he stunk at it. Or that he tried to play tight end and he stunk at it. And that he wasn't a great quarterback in the NFL. Like, when people talk about Heath Schuler, they don't talk about how he didn't play well in the NFL. They talk about the college career. With Tebow, Danny Warfel, same way. With Tebow, it's going to be, oh yeah, he was a good college quarterback at Florida. But when he went to the pros, he refused vehemently to try to play tight end. Then he won some games in Denver. Half the country believed the guy could throw the ball. Then he couldn't, and the entire league realized it. Then he tried to play baseball, which was embarrassing in and of itself. Then he tried to go back and play tight end. He embarrassed himself in one game. And now here's Tim Tebow, who's going to talk to you on SEC Network about college football and just throw a bunch of buzzwords like energy and high octane and hard worker.
Octane.
And I mean, when you watch Tebow, he's never talking about X's and O's. He's never talking about, I think the interior.
Talks a lot about heart.
Oh, never talks about the interior offensive line of somebody. But, it's all about passion and heart. And okay, Tim. That didn't hurt that when Tim was good, he had the best players around him in the entire country. But that's neither here nor there. So that's the first thing. There's that. Like, can Tebow please, for all of us, hang it up, be done, be gone. If you want to do SEC Network, do SEC Network. But oh my goodness, if I hear that he's going to try to play in the NBA, I'm going to lose my mind. The second thing is this. Urban. Is this not, as a Titan fan, I was so excited when the Jags hired Urban Meyer. I remember when it happened. And even Mark Howard was kind of on my side about it. Trevor, who's going to be on today for the entire 5 o'clock hour, Trevor was not so much on my side. He thought there was a chance that Urban Meyer could be a good NFL coach.
Well, Trevor's glass is always half full.
It's about 3/4 of the way full. Mm-hmm. And he thought there was a chance that Urban Meyer could be a good NFL head coach. Now, if you had asked me when Urban Meyer got hired, if I thought there was any chance Urban Meyer was going to be a good NFL coach, I'd have put it at 10%, which is still pretty terrible. Like, let's be honest, 10% is not good. But this Tebow mess and how bad they looked in that first preseason game, where, I mean, and it was, we talked about the Falcons and how bad the Falcons looked on Friday night against the Titans. Well, we know the Falcons have a bad team. And we know the Jags have a bad team too, in fairness to Urban. But, like, the organization looked terrible. Like, the getting out of the huddle looked terrible. I mean, they got the quarterback killed in a preseason game. It was awful. I'd lower that now to 2 or 3%. 2 or 3% chance this Urban Meyer thing works out. Because Urban
Just
Meyer...
based off of Tim Tebow?
No. Just based off the entire circus act that is Urban Meyer trying to run an NFL team. Because the one thing you have to understand about coaches is, like, if I'm smart enough to know that you have to have a different mentality in college than you do the pros,
Of course you do.
then you would assume that the guys that actually do it, the pro coaches, that they would know that too. Like that when Urban took the job in Jacksonville, that he, I don't know, picked up the phone and called Jimmy Johnson or called Nick Saban or called Doug Marrone or called whomever, maybe not Marrone because he was replacing him, but all these guys that have coached both. Because you have to be different in order to coach both. You cannot go. He cannot coach in the NFL the way he coached Ohio State. And yet every story we have heard since the day that that's happened, and most of us knew, you felt like Urban was too much of a jerk to be able to do it the NFL way. To be able to do it hey, the players run the operations here and we're just, behind the scenes. We just want to help the players. We just want to take care of the players. Like, you knew Urban couldn't do that. But now it's like, okay, this is a mess. You're getting your quarterback killed. You've had to run off your strength coach because you shouldn't have hired him in the first place. You brought in the circus and Tim Tebow. He played 5 preseason plays, and now you cut him because you realized it was embarrassing.
One of which was one of the most embarrassing plays I've ever seen in my life. One of the most embarrassing attempts I've ever seen from a professional football player in my life. But I have one question for you. You say it's down to 2 or 3%. What would it have been if he actually did add Tim Tebow to the roster?
Like to the active roster?
Yes.
0.
Because releasing Tim Tebow was what he should have done.
So here's the thing, though, about the NFL, and this goes back to the Urban thing. Where Urban screwed up in all of this was by pretending that Tebow was actually going to be an NFL player. And here's why. Because it's one thing when you're running a college team to bring on a walk-on. And yeah, okay, the guy's not very good at football, but his dad owns Jackson Motors, and they're the biggest financial backer of the University of Toledo football program. So guess what? Johnny Jackson gets to wear number 14, and he's the 5th string quarterback, and he's never going to play in a game, and he's never going to practice in a practice, and he's never even going to get in the spring game when the other 2 quarterbacks haven't even transferred in. He's just not going to play. But he's on the team because his dad, whatever. This is the NFL. Like, this is the NFL. Anthony Ferkser, at one point, was in the same position that Tim Tebow was. Those guys in that room want 90 guys who are competing for roster spots and can actually help their team. And you can't bring in a guy to motivate other guys when the guy stinks because everybody else is going to know it. Because I'm making $9 million a year and I bench press 800 pounds and I played in the league for 6 years and I'm one of the best in the world at what I do, and I'm going to have Urban Meyer bring in a has-been college quarterback from 15 years ago to sit down and be like, all right, guys, we're going to play with a lot of heart. Like, dude, I've got 3 kids. Like, you're going to sit here and tell me this kind of stuff? So if Urban had put him on the roster, then the entire, like, I think that there are guys that play on the Jags that saw that roster move when they signed him, and they said, okay, that's pathetic. Like, that's like, what, like, boss man, what are we doing? That's pathetic. But they're not going to voice it because they, you say something, then it's a headline and everyone's got to deal with it. You got to deal with the coach and go in the office. But if he had made the team, they'd have said this guy's off his rocker. So at least Urban didn't go that far. Again, 2 or 3%. And that 2 or 3%, I think, also hinges on whether or not Trevor Lawrence is the greatest quarterback who ever lived. And there's probably a 2 or 3% chance that that happens. So that's why I give Urban 2 or 3%. The third part about it is this. To your point, I would have had no faith. I mean zero faith in the Jacksonville Jags and Urban Meyer had they kept Tim Tebow on the roster. But yet I'm so happy he got released today, and I don't know why. I don't know. It's like when I saw Tebow get released, I'm like, yes. And I don't know why I care. I don't care about anything else Tim Tebow does. So when Tim Tebow went to baseball, I thought it was dumb, but I didn't care. And then when they talked about Tim Tebow playing in a spring training game, I didn't care. And when they talked about Tim Tebow, I don't care. I don't care about Tebow. And I almost feel like talking about Tebow is counterintuitive to the fact that I don't like Tebow. I don't like people who are just out there seeking attention. And I hate to break it to you, but it feels like that's what Tebow's all about. Jason Whitlock, and I don't agree with almost anything that Jason Whitlock has ever said over the last 15 years. But Jason Whitlock said a couple of years ago before he burned his bridge at Fox, he said that Tebow just liked vanity, that he was a Kardashian, and he just likes the attention. And I get it, because when you're on SEC Network, what kind of attention are you really getting? That's why everybody who's ever been on SEC Network is trying to get off of SEC Network. So Tebow's on SEC Network every week with Roman Harper, and it's like, well, there's no attention there. So he goes back to the NFL, tons of attention. He loves the vanity, and I don't like
and
paying
people love
attention.
to give it to him.
Sure. I don't like paying attention to things that are literally just barking for attention. I don't like it. And so maybe that's why I'm so happy Tebow got released today. I'm so happy this charade is over. I'm so happy. And you would think that, like, as a grown man in his 30s, I shouldn't have this kind of emotional investment into Tim Tebow getting cut. It's not like I'm happy that Tim Tebow made the team. I cannot believe it. Like, that I'm happy that I feel this just joy that Tim Tebow has been released. But I do. I am so happy. Oh, I'm so happy for so many reasons. I'm happy that it's over with Tebow. I'm happy that the idea of, Tim Tebow signed in Jacksonville, and now people want to talk about it for 45 days straight. I'm glad that's over. I'm glad that now we know for a fact the small chance that we began with that maybe Urban Meyer could take his great coaching acumen into Jacksonville and maybe build a contender with the Jags. I'm glad it's over. But I'm also glad that we can all look at Tim Tebow and we can all now admit he can't play. He can't play. This is the NFL, a meritocracy. Popularity does not matter, and he can't play. And I am so glad. I am so glad to see that he's gone. Oh, I'm just so happy. 615-737-1025. Phones, text, your reaction to Tebow being released. Because guess what? I thought about this today. I'm like, this is a sports show in Nashville, Tennessee. Tim Tebow played in the SEC. SEC's big here. Jacksonville, Titans rival, okay. And it's Tebow, huge national story. Does it lead the show today? I thought about that. Does it lead the show? And I said this. I will never have the opportunity to celebrate the failures of a Tim Tebow attention-grabbing attempt ever again in my life.
I don't say that.
It leads,
not so fast.
It leads the show today. 615-737-1025. Two questions. One, are you glad it's over with Tebow? Like, even if you loved Tebow at Florida, even if you loved Tebow, now this is funny because I'm here banging on Tebow today. When he was with the Broncos, and I didn't follow their games closely because I was in college and whatever, but when he was with the Broncos and they were 8-8, made the playoffs, they beat the Steelers in that playoff game with that touchdown pass to Demarius Thomas, I was like, you know what? He just wins, baby. He won at Florida. He's a winner. He just wins. And I kept thinking that, like, he just wins. But then when I saw him with the Jets, I'm like, nah, he sucks. And ever since that moment, I have been an anti-Tebow guy. An anti-T-bite. I am. The other part about this is, how do we feel about Urban and Jacksonville? Does this just prove that Urban can't do it in Jacksonville? Because that was a big thought that a lot of people had. 615-737-1025. We'll go to your reaction, Caroline's reaction, Ian's reaction, whatever we got. Plus, Stephen A. Smith. We can talk about this as far as Tim Tebow being a reaction. Stephen A. Smith had a reaction to this that literally just hit me out of nowhere. And I think it should be discussed because I don't want this narrative to get out there. We'll discuss that next. We're live from the Wholesaling Studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app.
What do you think, Dan Graziano? What is your sense of this from a Jaguars perspective and everything else?
A lot of people were upset when they signed him, thinking, oh, it's going to take a spot away from somebody. It's a 90-man off-season roster. The fact that he's one of the first 5 cuts indicates that it really was pretty harmless to try this out. The warning sign to me was he didn't play on special teams in the game the other day, right? If you're going to be the 3rd or 4th tight end and you're not going to play special teams, that indicated to me that it might be close to the end of this run. But ultimately, they gave it a shot. It didn't work out. I'm sure the next thing Tim Tebow tries will be fascinating to watch.
That was Dan Graziano, ESPN. Let me say this. I am ecstatic that Tim Tebow got released in Jacksonville. And I cannot tell you why. I cannot explain it as to why I'm so happy.
I think part of the reason why you're happy is because from the very beginning you said this will be a disaster. So I think you're kind of a little bit excited that it actually ended up being a disaster. Maybe not a disaster,
but it's not
but it ended up not working out.
It's not like I'm happy that I was right. Like, I know the feeling of being happy when you're right. Mm-hmm. Like, I know what that's like, and I know what, hey, oh, Jared, you said the Predators weren't going to beat the Blackhawks.
I told you so.
And here they go, like, whatever. Okay. I'm used to that. Like, so the excitement of being right, being wrong doesn't really get me. It's like when David Poile makes a bad trade and I say it's a bad trade and then it shows that it becomes a bad trade. Like, I don't get joy out of being right. But on the Tebow front, I hate the bull crap. Is it wrong for me to say it like that? Like, I hate how dumb this all is. And it's just every freaking time Tebow decides to do something, it takes a spot away from somebody who legitimately deserves to be there. It's like this business. There are positions that get hired in sports talk radio. I think this town is a great example of it. Because there are some hires of people that just don't belong on the radio. And I get mad about it. Like when somebody gets hired to host a show and they have no talent and they have no ability to host a radio show, I get mad because there are a lot of people out there that would kill for this kind of job that don't put in the work or don't have the effort or don't have the skills. And I'm like embarrassed for that. And I think that's how I feel about the Tebow thing.
Kind of dilutes the people who do it at a very high level, who are able to compete at that level at the NFL. I think that's what it is for me, that Tebow just bugs me to no end.
Sure.
I can't really pinpoint exactly why. I think it's a bunch of things all wrapped up into one, but I think it's him getting the opportunity to do all of these different things almost feels like it's such a gimmick kind of thing.
It's so stupid.
It's gimmicky.
So
and
with
it waters down the NFL for me. It waters down the MLB for me when he does all of these different things.
So let's get in some Tebow reaction, and then we'll get to the Stephen A. thing, because the Stephen A. thing's ridiculous. But let's get some Tebow reaction in 615-737-1025. Text line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What do we have?
Ben texts into the text line and says, to say Urban has no shot at having success as an NFL head coach is very premature. The guy has been gifted the best quarterback to come out of college since Andrew Luck.
Okay, let's go around the room. I'm putting it at 3%. That Urban Meyer succeeds in Jacksonville. 3%.
What is success?
What would you guys put it at? He's got to make the playoffs twice. Anybody can make the playoffs once.
I'm going to give
Butch Davis made the playoffs once with the Cleveland Browns. Anybody can make the playoffs once. You have to make the playoffs twice.
I'm going to give it like an 8%.
Okay, so you're still under 10.
Still under 10. I'm not high on it.
I was going to go right at 10.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's... That
not a ton of faith.
No. And it's because one of the things about Urban is that he's such he when he was at Ohio State, when he was at Florida, he coached with a giant rod up his rear end, right?
Yes.
Like he was just the king jerk. And that works in college. Some guys can do that. You can't really do that in pro sports. You can't really be that guy. Now, you can't be some bum like Mike McCarthy, but you can't be the guy you can't be a Fruit Loop like the guy in Detroit who's doing up downs and stuff like that. Like that guy's freaking crazy. What would we put his % chance of being successful at?
2.
Like he and Urban are probably that's what somebody should tell Urban. Hey, Urban, this is how little faith America has in you, that we're putting you on the same level as that crazy Detroit coach. So anywho, Coach Up Down, like you can't be crazy.
Coach Burpee.
Yeah, you can't be that guy. But you cannot coach in pro sports with a giant rod up your rear end unless you win. So, like, if you're Bill Belichick, see, here's the thing about Belichick. People forget about this. I watched the NFL Network documentary, America's Game, on the 2001 Patriots, where Adam Vinatieri I believe it was Adam Vinatieri, Tom Brady, and maybe Willie McGinnis or Ty Law or somebody like that. And they kind of narrated the season. And Belichick, at one point, named Brady the starter over Bledsoe. And Ty Law said that everybody there was like, "You're naming who as the quarterback?" I don't know about this. But then when Brady started to win, it was like, okay, now he made the right choice. Now, everything that guy says, you're going to buy into. And that's what happened in New England. But that's why all these guys leave Bill and they try to go coach somewhere else. And it never works because you can't act like Bill because those players haven't seen you have the success the Bills had to trust that you, with a rod up your rear end, are coaching like that because you know that that's how to be successful. They just think you're a jerk. And so when Urban takes that personality into the NFL, he's got to change. He can't hire the racist strength coach from Iowa and then argue that, well, I think it's – no, dude, you got to be like, no, I understood the players' concerns, and I really feel like the players have to feel like you're invested in their success. And Urban never did that at Florida or at Ohio State. And if he's going to try to act like that in the NFL, this is never going to work. What's next?
Another texter texts in and said, the Titans need a tight end. Bring in Tebow.
I would argue that Jared Pinkney, when he was at Vanderbilt, I thought was going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. I mean, Pinkney had the size. He had the speed. I mean, he looked like a Georgia tight end playing for Vanderbilt. Every now and then, Vandy gets some of these players in football that look like they should be on somebody else's team. Like, oh, wow, hey, you look like you're big, strong, athletic. Are you sure you should be on Vanderbilt? Are you sure you shouldn't be on Texas A&M? And Pinkney looked like that as a tight end. I see Pinkney out there right now at practice, and he doesn't look like he could catch up with this. So that's telling you how far, like, what the difference between a real tight end and Tebow is. Because Tebow's a fake tight end. He's not a real tight end. And so, no, not buying it, not 1 second. I just, gosh, and I know that the texter's kidding, but I just hope this is the end of Tim Tebow.
Hypothetical question for you.
Okay.
Tim Tebow comes into the league. He doesn't work out as a quarterback. Everyone's pushing him to try tight end, and I know he pushed back on it vehemently.
Sure.
But what if he didn't? What if he embraced it and became a tight end? Do you think that from the jump, when he first was in the NFL, when he was younger, do you think he could have been successful?
How tall is Tebow?
I don't know, but on TV he looks pretty tight end-esque. Like
does
broad
he look
shoulders,
tall enough?
big.
He might be. I don't know.
Let's see. Tim Tebow.
Because being tall for a quarterback.
6'2".
Yeah, see, like being tall for a quarterback and being tall for a tight end are two totally different things. So I don't think he's big enough, but to your point, I think he would have had a much better shot. Mm-hmm. Like Logan Thomas did that. Quarterback converts to tight end. I think he's now a tight end in the league, and they run gimmick plays for him. But I think he's like 6'6". So, no, it would have never. No, Tebow's not a pro. He's not a pro player. He's not. There are so many guys who were good college football players who were never good in the pros. That's Tebow. There are good college baseball players that never make it above AA. When I was in college at Louisville, we had a shortstop and a second baseman. Shortstop was a guy named Ryan Wright. Ryan Wright was a freshman All-American. He was later an All-American at Louisville. He played on Team USA with Garrett Cole and Trevor Bauer, and he hit cleanup on that team. And Ryan Wright never made it above AA. The second baseman was named Adam Duvall. And Adam Duvall was a decent player, but he was never an All-American. Got drafted, I think, in the 11th round by the Giants. All of a sudden, changes his swing. Now he's an all-star. Like, there are just some guys that are good college players that are not good pro players. And so no. And they see, it's because out of every 10 people that are sports fans, 9 of them know Tebow can't play. Like, no, he cannot play pro sports. The end, cannot play pro sports. He is not qualified to play pro sports. He is not young enough anymore to play pro sports. He's not big enough at certain positions to play pro sports. They just know he can't do it. Can't hit a fastball, can't dunk a basketball, can't shoot a three, he can't do any of that. But that one person, every time I see them, they're saying, no, he can play. He can play. I tell you, Tim Tebow, he can play. And that just drives me insane. Speaking of driving me insane, we do have to get to what Stephen A. said. So, I do want to leave time for that. Because what Stephen A. said, I mean, it just got me. It not only got me, it got you. I didn't even know that you saw the same thing I saw, but it got you, so we'll do that coming up next. 615-737-1025. ESPN 94.9 is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Listening tomorrow night, Nashville SC takes on Orlando at Nissan Stadium. 7:15 start for the show, and the match at 7:30. Stillman & Company's delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman & Company delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 102.5 The Game. So Tim Tebow's been released. I'm not going to spend all show on Tim Tebow being released, though I probably could because I'm that excited about it. I know
You're
it sounds
fired
bad.
up about Tebow.
You're going to have to learn that you turn the microphone on by pressing this red button.
I am aware of that. I just not here very often.
And this is 2 segments.
At the Green Hill Studio, we don't have to do that.
I do love the Green Hill Studio.
The Green Hill Studio is very nice.
Yes, you
I
had
do love
someone
this
do that
place as
for
well.
you at the Green Hill Studio. Yes.
That is true.
Someone who we appreciate very much. Thank you,
Two
Ian.
people that do that, because I do the one, right there, and then you do the one.
So I never had to do it. I'm learning.
So we'll see. We'll see how Caroline progresses on being able to remember to turn her mic on every break. Stephen A. Smith. So I am a Stephen A. supporter. I know there are people that probably listen to this that think, well, you go on the radio and you say a bunch of stuff. So because you say a bunch of stuff, all of a sudden that means that you will love everybody else who says a bunch of stuff. And that's not that's not 100% true. But I don't mind people that have an opinion and that share their opinion, and that it's when your opinion becomes, how can I say this? Incendiary, that now I start to get a little bothered by this. You heard the same thing I heard today, and you told me that you reacted similarly to me.
I stopped in my tracks.
I was eating my cereal this morning, and I heard Stephen A. Smith. They were talking about the reaction to Tebow, and I heard Stephen A. Smith talking about his reaction to Tebow being released, and I said, wait a minute. And I'm like, look, this isn't the safest topic to talk about on the radio, and I hear there are other radio stations in Nashville that don't want to rock any boats and just want to play things safe, and we know that this show doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. But this was Stephen A. Smith's reaction this morning on ESPN to the news that Tim Tebow had been released.
Let's harken back to when it was first announced that Tim Tebow was going at the age of 33, going on age 34. He just turned 34 this past Saturday. Happy belated birthday. At age 33, going on age 34, when it was first announced that Tim Tebow was going to be on the Jacksonville Jaguars, going for a tight end spot. Do you remember the look on our colleague's face, Ryan Clark? Everybody was just laughing and, all right, Tim Tebow going for it. Ryan Clark was not laughing. Ryan Clark has nothing against Tim Tebow. Ryan Clark didn't wish him to fail or anything like that. But you could sense it, and you could transition from Ryan Clark to Damian Woody to Marcus Spears. The list goes on and on of former football players who happen to be African American. And where does that come from? What America needs to understand is that we're not talking about Tim Tebow. We all root for him individually as the person, as the man. What we were talking about is exactly what you just brought up, Max. Opportunity.
So Stephen A. is basically making this a race issue. That Tim Tebow was given the opportunity because he was white. And I heard that and I thought, is that the way people are talking about this? Like, do people think that? And I mean, look, I am not. You all know me. You all remember when the Titans canceled practice last year in wake of the shooting in Wisconsin, and they decided that they were going to make a thing for social justice. I said, look, I don't have any problem with it. And if you've got a problem with the Titans skipping a practice that you can't go to and you can't see, that has nothing to do with you, then it tells me more about you than it does the Titans. But I heard that this morning and I'm like, is really? And I feel like Stephen A. Smith wanted to go there. Like
Of course he did.
I feel like there's no substance behind Stephen A.'s claims that there is somehow in Tim Tebow getting an opportunity or in Tim Tebow being released or that in Tim Tebow, that there is to me, there is no racial coding to that. There is no, hidden message. There is no, I think this is a raceless issue. And here's Stephen A. Smith on the most popular show on ESPN immediately making it a race issue. And I think this is where I struggle with this stuff because I don't think that we should leave things like race and religion and I don't think we should leave that out of sports. I don't think we should not talk about it at all. But I think that we should talk about it when it matters. Like when something is racist, we should talk about it. And we should condemn it for being racist. When there is hidden messaging in something, we should talk about it and condemn it and point to it and say, that's not what this is. But when Stephen A. Smith is talking about it in relation to Tim Tebow getting an opportunity with the Jacksonville Jags, I think you're doing more damage to the ability to move things forward in that regard, because most of the people like me who are kind of normally on that side are looking at that saying it's ridiculous. And I was so bothered by that today because I felt like you're trying to go there when there's nowhere to go with it. And that bothers me.
There were no grounds for it. And it was my understanding Tim Tebow got this opportunity because Urban Meyer loves Tim Tebow.
Yes.
They won a national championship together. Tim Tebow won a Heisman underneath Urban Meyer. They have a history. It's like Paul Feinbaum called it a father and son relationship.
Which is embarrassing, but yes.
Yes, and that's what it is. And I think that Urban Meyer could have had that relationship with any player that brought him that much success. So I think it also undermines the actual racist issues that are happening in the NFL, in the world, because they are happening.
But when somebody wants to scream about it like that, then somebody who you're trying to convince or somebody who you're trying to have that discussion with is going to turn and say, well, wait a minute now. Like that just, there they go again. So then it's almost like Boy Who Cried Wolf. Like that's what it becomes.
That's what it feels like, because if you keep calling things racist for people getting opportunities, and he mentions Ryan Clark, he mentions Marcus Spears, black men who are on ESPN who also got opportunities. Tim Tebow got an opportunity on air for the SEC network, as did Marcus Spears, as did Stephen A. Smith, as did Ryan Clark, as have a lot of other people of color. So saying that he got an opportunity because he's white, it doesn't have any grounds.
And if you were to ever say anything that is you got an opportunity because of, and it's not that, you get fired.
Yes.
And I don't like that either. Like, I don't like that you want to say, hey, we have a show in which we hit the important issues and we'll go there and but you won't go there all the time. And I'm somebody who believes in systemic racism. And I think it's a problem. And I think it's something that has to be addressed. And like, I believe it's real. Mm-hmm. I do. But at the same time, I can't, I am trying to focus on like what's best for society, mm-hmm. and to be making claims like that with that audience on national TV when I don't think there's any merit to it. And I think the downside of what happens when you make baseless claims like that, when I see how it will affect people that you are trying to get through to me, I don't want to say I take it personally, but I think there's a big element there of you are really hurting what you're actually trying to do. The long-term goal that you have for what you want society to be like, you are hurting that for a short-term gain of maybe some corporate executives or somebody that's going to tell you, hey, that's a great point, Stephen A., because most people are not buying that. 615-737-1025. Let's get to the Titans. There is a Titans story that if it were a player of any just a little bigger quality would be much bigger. But I think it's a big discussion. So we'll get to that next. Plus, a player that most of you guys have not heard of has been put on IR. And I am going to tell you, as somebody who goes to practice every day, I hate it for the Titans. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
What I liked about Josh is I don't think he started out the practice very well, and then, he came back and made a huge play at the end. And we talked about, hey, listen, man, you dropped the pass, didn't convert a route or whatever it was early. But this is the first quarter of the game, and it was cool. It was cool to see him come back and hit that shot and hit that play, down the field. So, yeah, I mean, he's working hard, and I think that we'll see some good things from him this week in Tampa.
That was Josh Reynolds. I will be in Tampa. Get excited about that. Thanks to our friends at TriStar Moving. And Vrabel,
was that Josh Reynolds?
Oh, that was Vrabel talking about Josh Reynolds. Thank you there.
Got you.
Good job on your
Also
microphone,
forgot
guys.
the button. Yeah.
Again. But,
I told myself, press the button.
so going into the season, it's funny because Des Fitzpatrick is like 13th right now on the Titans depth chart at wide receiver. And I've got people that coach him in college that are telling me like, hey, like Des Fitzpatrick's going to make it. Don't give up on Des. And I listen to those people. But when they drafted Des Fitzpatrick, we sat there at the draft show and we talked about all of those receivers. We talked about Elijah Moore. We talked about Tutu Atwell. We talked about Rondale Moore. We talked about Rashad Bateman. And we just kept watching receiver. Dylan Radens. Receiver. Monty Rice. Receiver. Here you go. Finally, Des Fitzpatrick. And the reason I bring this up is because Julio Jones was not on the Tennessee Titans at that time. Now, maybe the master plan, the fix was in Arthur and John and Mike, and maybe it was in, but I don't think it was. And so that's how much faith. The Titans had Josh Reynolds as their number 2 wide receiver. Now, maybe they knew that they had something in Chester Rogers and Marcus Johnson, and we didn't. But at that point in time, Josh Reynolds was their number 2 wide receiver. Now, I did all the numbers. Josh Reynolds is basically 80% of the player Corey Davis is, but he's at roughly like 1/10 of the salary, which is good. But he's been hurt so far in camp, hasn't really done much, had shoulder surgery, I believe, in the offseason. And now Josh Reynolds told everybody yesterday he's dealing with Achilles issues. Here's what he said.
The things that you're working through, is that lower body?
Yeah. Some Achilles stuff. So.
What? Like, first of all, the Titans probably need to get their audio video there fixed before the season starts at the stadium. But secondly, what? Achilles? Like, that's a big deal. Achilles. That is a big, there are certain words I hear when it's like, oh yeah, it's got an issue with my knee. Okay, a lot of people got issues with knees.
Got some shoulder soreness.
Ankle, things like that. As long as it's not broken or the ACL's not torn, like, okay, he's sprained his knee, it'll be a couple weeks. All right, fine. Achilles.
But as long as it's not a torn Achilles.
Yeah, but do you know how close it is from, my Achilles is sore to my Achilles is torn?
Pretty close.
Ask Kevin Durant. Like, that is Achilles. That is a very sensitive and tender part. And I would say this. Now, the Titans doctors, and I say this with full belief, that the Titan doctors would not let him on that practice field if he thought there was a chance he was going to tear that Achilles, outside of the normal chance that everybody has of tearing their Achilles every time they take a step. But they would not have let him out there. But it's funny that to fans, if it's not a big injury to Tannehill, Henry, A.J. Brown, Lewan, Julio Jones, Bud Dupree, if it's not one of those guys, it's just kind of a camp injury, and we'll see where we go. Ben Jones hasn't practiced in a week. It's camp injury. We'll see where Ben Jones is going. Okay. Josh Reynolds is supposed to be a big part of what they're trying to do. Like, we all got excited when it comes to the 5 out, right? Like, the 5 guys. A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Derrick Henry, Anthony Ferkser, Josh Reynolds. And Reynolds is very much a part of why you're supposed to be excited about those 5 guys.
And let us not forget pre-Julio acquisition, Josh Reynolds was supposed to be wide receiver 2.
No, they didn't. That's my point. They didn't draft anybody. He was their number 2 wide receiver. And I was a Josh Reynolds defender. I was a guy saying, hey, Like, give him a chance to be the number 2 wide receiver. And I'm still fine with giving him a chance to be the number 2 wide receiver. I mean, not on this team, but giving him a chance to be a number 2 receiver in this league because he's been a good 3. And when you are a good 3, you get a chance to go show if you're a 2. And then when you get your opportunity, you have to show it, and then you'll get paid like it. But I go back to, I hear the word Achilles, and I think to myself, whoa, 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 whoa. Because if Reynolds isn't out there, and I like Marcus Johnson, and I like Chester Rogers, and I like these other guys in camp, but if Reynolds is not out there, that is a big hit to what you're trying to do offensively. Everybody's told me, well, with all the attention that Derrick Henry will get and all the attention that A.J. Brown and Julio Jones will garner, that means it'll be wide open for Anthony Ferkser and Josh Reynolds. But if that's Mason Kinsey or Cam Batson or Nick Westbrook-Akina who's out there instead of Josh Reynolds, then that's more attention teams will feel comfortable about giving to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and Anthony Ferkser. So, like, I heard that, and I'm like, man, I'm worried. Because I heard the word Achilles. Like, when I hear the word Achilles, I get a little worried. Because we've seen, hey, the guy's got a calf strain. He'll go out, pop. And you can't have that this year. And Reynolds is going to try to play through anything. Mm-hmm. Because he signed,
wants that number 2 spot.
Well, he signed, I think, for like 1 year, $2 million or something like that. And it took him a while to sign. I had people telling me, my people at the Titans, telling me Josh Reynolds. Like, even before free agency opened up, they were telling me Josh Reynolds. And I'm like, okay, like, plays in a similar system with the Rams. Like, I could see that making sense. So you sign Josh Reynolds. Okay, fine. And it took forever. It was a very late signing. Because Reynolds didn't sign for much money. So what I think happened was Corey Davis goes on the first day. And then there were days where there were a lot of wide receivers out there. I think it took Kenny Golladay a couple days to get his deal with the Lions or with the Giants. I think it took Marvin Jones Jr. a couple of days to get his deal with Jacksonville. And so then they started going one by one. And Reynolds was still out there. And then I think Reynolds looked at it like, okay, they've had their opportunity to go sign a big receiver, and they haven't. All they've got's A.J. Brown. Now they're telling me, hey, we just don't have the money to give you anything better. So if you can go get something better, go get it. But we're offering you the opportunity. So you're not going to make the money, but you're going to make the opportunity. And as we all know, this is how this works in football. If you make the most of the opportunity, then next year you're going to go out and get the money. And so then I think he took it. And when he had his press conference, when he signed, he talked a lot about Corey Davis. Basically saying, hey, I'm Corey Davis, the Corey Davis role. Okay, that's my seat at the table. Don't go out and trade for Julio Jones. And then they went out and they traded for Julio Jones. So he's going to try to get out there on the field and make the most of this season and then go back into free agency and go get his money. And I understand that. But when I hear the word Achilles, I get a little nervous. And that's making me nervous as far as Reynolds is concerned because I think Reynolds is a big part of what they do. Now, the other thing about the Titans that is concerning to me, people don't know this name because I think sometimes people can't watch practice. And when you can't watch practice, there are names you just don't know. It's our job to tell you who those guys are. And when I watched the game Friday night, I thought we did an excellent job of covering training camp practice because we talked a lot about Tier Tart and Laurel Murchison and Mason Kinsey and Chester Rogers and Logan Woodside. So when you watch those guys play well in the preseason, I think you can say, okay, they are really there at practice. I mean, they are taking it every day and giving me the best inside scoop on the team, which I hope that's how you feel, and I appreciate that. But there was a guy on the defensive line, number 97, Trevon Coley, and the Titans just put him on IR. And I don't think a lot of fans know who he is. But I loved Trevon Coley in practice. And I thought early in the Atlanta game, before he got hurt, Trevon Coley made some plays. And you know how I feel about defensive line depth. I love it. I think as many bodies as you can get out there, as many fat guys that can run a little bit, that can go get to the quarterback or stop the run, I love. And when I see Trevon Coley placed on IR, meaning he's done for the year, and I don't know what he hurt in the Atlanta game, but when I see that, I really am thinking to myself, oh, man, that's a loss. That is a big loss because you can never have enough quality defensive linemen. And so whoever makes the team now, because Coley's out, whoever makes it is not as good as him. And so when you are trying to rotate Jeffrey Simmons out of the game or Danico Autry out of the game, and you're saying, okay, do we put in, I'm trying to think, Woodrow Hamilton the fourth, or do we send Simmons back out there for another snap? I'm guessing they're going to send Simmons back out there for another snap. And I think you've got to ration those snaps. I think you got to rest Simmons. You got to rest Autry. So I know nobody's talking about this, but I think the loss of Trevon Coley is a big loss to the Titans. And so I saw that news today, and I was pretty bummed out about it. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, everybody is putting out their 53-man roster for the Titans. And I'm sure at some point I'll do that too. But the one thing that I think, there's one key element to the football team everybody's overlooking. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving ESP at 1025 The Game. 53-man roster time. We're not there yet. Now we're getting to the point where the guys who just stink are, for the most part, getting cut. A la Tim Tebow in Jacksonville. Guys that have no business being on your team, they're going to get released. I saw the Titans brought in a tight end like last week on like Saturday, and they cut him on Monday. That means they watched him practice one day. They said, this guy stinks.
We're done.
Yep, see ya.
Yeah, we're done here.
Yeah, it's just got to go. So I see everybody's putting out 53-man roster projections. I'm reading Luke Warsham's at A to Z Sports. I feel like I dumped on Luke yesterday, so now I'll highlight that I'm reading Luke's 53-man roster. And I do like Luke, and I think he's got a future covering the NFL. So I do like Luke. But I got his up in front of me. And everybody's just putting together, the list. Like, okay, here's who's going to be at outside linebacker. Here's who's going to be. And all these guys go to practice. They all see them. They all see just what I see. And so I read who makes the team and why they make them. And I think what happens is people get caught up in three things when trying to project what a team's roster is going to look like. Number one, they feel like there are certain number quotas that you have to hit at positions. So it's like, well, you can't carry 8 wide receivers. You can. Most teams don't. But in theory, if you don't want to put Marcus Johnson on waivers, or you have to keep Des Fitzpatrick, or you don't want to let go of Joe Rex Rhodes, Nick Westbrook-Akina, then you've got to do something. So that's the first thing that I think a lot of people are missing is they think, well, you have to have because this is the generic way to do, and I've seen, and in 2015, and again, the 2015 Titans, they were not a great sign of what premier roster building looks like, but the 2015 Titans carried 4 wide receivers. Again, I wouldn't do that, but that is one thing that I think you've got to take account of. The second thing I think that a lot of people are missing is who you take at the back end of your roster is not so much about who the best player is. It'd be very easy to say, okay, who are the best 53 guys? And then put it together and say, well, Jeremy McNichols, for example, is not one of the best 53. But then you have to ask yourself, do you trust Darrington Evans to pass protect on third down? You don't trust Derrick Henry to do it. I doubt you trust Mekhi Sargent to do it. You definitely won't trust Brian Hill to do it. So the only way that Jeremy McNichols can't make this team is if you think Darrington Evans can pass protect on third down. And then Darrington Evans goes out in the Falcons game and gets hurt. Now, it doesn't seem like it's a big injury, but if Darrington Evans has a little bit of a concern as far as whether or not he'll be available on most Sundays after what we saw last year and not what we've seen in one game, then Jeremy McNichols has to make the team. So you could say, well, Mekhi Sargent is playing more in these preseason games than Jeremy McNichols, and he goes out there before McNichols goes out there, so Sargent should make the team and McNichols shouldn't. And I'm like, do they trust Mekhi Sargent to pass protect on third down? Because I know they trust McNichols to do it. That's one thing. Another thing I think people don't look at is going to be who gives them the best advantage on special teams. They just signed Nick Dzubnar yesterday. That's a bad sign for every single guy that they have brought in and have tried out at special teams this offseason that isn't already a core special teamer. Because the only reason they brought in Dzubnar last year was to play special teams. So when they re-sign Nick Dzubnar, they're re-signing him to play special teams. So how many core special teamers are they going to take? Because I know that you can say, well, I like this guy at safety because he's making plays. Is he a core special teamer? Racey McMath is not going to make the Titans as a wide receiver. And I like Racey McMath, and I like the projectability, and I think the Titans would love to sneak him onto the practice squad. That big body, maybe move him to tight end. But he's not making the team if he's not the gunner on punt return or on punts. And if he's not the gunner on punts, then he's not going to be in the NFL. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. What are these guys' special teams values? Because then it's not really, well, do I want Bob or Joe for that last linebacker spot? It's more so, do I want that running back, this wide receiver, or that linebacker for that spot? John Simon, core special teamer this year, he's going to make the Titans. So now how many guys can you take? Now he's going to have a role as an outside pass rusher, but how many guys can you take to play special teams? I'd be worried if I was Dan Cruikshank about keeping my job. Yeah, I play safety. They lost Kenny Vaccaro. Amarni Hooker moves up a spot. But if I'm not playing special teams, I'm probably not going to make the team. And the third thing, and I can't put this on anybody, whether it's Luke Warsham, whether it's Ben Arthur at the Tennessean who did one, whether I'm sure Joe's going to do one at The Athletic, TD's going to do one at ESPN, and we don't know this, but I have to believe vaccination status plays a role in some of this. That if I am looking at the end, I had a buddy who's on an NFL team now, and he was a free agent a couple of months ago, and he told me he had received 3 calls from 3 teams. All 3 teams asked him one question.
Are you vaccinated?
Are you vaccinated? That's it. I asked John Robinson when he met with the media on the first day of practice about vaccines and vaccinations and things. I asked John Robinson, I said, would you take a guy who has been vaccinated, if we're talking bottom of the roster? You're not going to take Jeremy McNichols over Derrick Henry based upon vaccination status. But would you take a bottom of the roster guy over a guy who might be a little bit better than him based upon vaccination status? And John Robinson looked at me and said, well, we'll have to do what's in the best interest of the football team. Mm-hmm. Subtext. Yes. Yes. So that's why it's hard for me to project who's going to make this team. Because I don't know how they feel about the other elements that would affect them on the back end. I'll give you an example. All the guys that have shown that they can't play get shown the door pretty quickly, right? Mm-hmm. Blake Hallbeal got shown the door pretty quickly. Deshaun Kaiser got shown the door pretty quickly. Like guys that have shown, hey, they just can't play. The worst player on the Titans. Do you think it's fair for me to say somebody is the worst player on the Titans?
I don't
do you think
think
it's
so.
fair to that player?
You could say they are at the bottom of the barrel, but I don't think it's fair to say the worst.
Like that I've been at practice, I consider to be the single worst player on the Titans.
The worst player you've seen, I think, is fine to say.
But is it okay? Like, is it mean to say that? Like, is it going too far to say? I mean, not that I really care, but like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But again, this is just keeping it real. I think
it's your opinion.
I think Daniel Munyer is the worst player on the Tennessee Titans. If we rank them 1 to 90, because he's a center and he can't snap.
Well, that'll do it.
Because he literally
That's your job.
cannot snap. Could not snap in practice. Could not snap into the shotgun. Could not snap to Tannehill. Could not snap to Logan. Just could not snap. And he's starting against the Atlanta Falcons. And you would say, I mean, I thought they were going to release him. Like after practice, like one of those ones that's like, hey, we've got a break until 1:30 after at 11, it's noon. We got a break till 1:30. Everybody hit lunch. Daniel, my office. Thank you. Like that's what I thought. But they have to keep him because Ben Jones is banged up. Aaron Brewer, who we would assume is going to be the backup center, is banged up. So they don't have any centers. And center has to know the entire offensive line. Mm-hmm. So he's got to be out there. But he can't snap. So that's the hard part about determining what they're going to do with this roster is thinking about all the little, complexities to making the 53-man puzzle. I can tell you who the best players at every position are. And I'm reading Luke Warsham's 53-man roster, in which he has Kyle Pecco as a defensive lineman making the team. And he writes at A to Z Sports, quote, Trevon Coley looked to be the leader of the pack for the final spot before going down with a season-ending injury, so Pecco gets it here. Makes sense to me. I've told you I thought Trevon Coley was going to make the team. Trevon Coley's hurt. He's not going to make the team. But can Pecco play outside in that 3-4? Like, can he play one of the DN spots, or is he a nose tackle? 5 technique, 9 technique? What's he going to play? And those are the little, issues that come with building this roster that make it very hard for me to be able to tell people what's going to happen on the back end. And I would love to tell you that it doesn't matter who makes the back end of the roster. But we've seen Anthony Ferkser come up off the practice squad, and now he's the starting tight end. Breon Borders was a guy I had never heard of until last year. And all of a sudden, he's probably the backup outside starting corner. And Christian Fulton has been getting burned in practice. Now he's been making some good plays too. But if Fulton can't play and Farley's hurt, they're going to put Borders in the game. So that's kind of one thing that is going to be, that's where the games matter, right? Derrick Henry's not going to play. But where the games matter is 3rd down and 13, Darrington Evans next to Logan Woodside. Can he pass protect? And if he can't, that just cost Dan Cruikshank his job. Not because of anything Dan Cruikshank did, but because you got to carry somebody else to put in there to pass protect. And that's the wild part of all this. We'll get your thoughts on it next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I will be in Tampa tonight. They practice first thing in the morning tomorrow, and then they practice first thing in the morning Thursday. So we'll be doing the show from Tampa. We'll have 2 TD Power Hours. So if you're somebody who drives home from work in the 3 o'clock hour every day, and you probably love the TD Power Hour, no, we're going to have one tomorrow, and we're going to have one Thursday, both live from Tampa for all of that. 615-737-1025. We are live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I have been using my friends at Hiller for years, and I love telling you about Hiller. They absolutely do a fantastic job, which is why they've got a 4.8 out of 5-star rating, average out over 15,000 online reviews. It is grilling and chilling season, and this summer, Hiller has great deals for their customers. Get your free grilling must-haves when you make home improvements, like a free Yeti Tundra cooler with the purchase of a new tankless water heater, a free Traeger wood pellet grill with the purchase of a new whole home generator, a free Traeger wood pellet grill with the purchase of select new HVAC systems, and more. My friends at Hiller, their work is backed by the happy you'll be or the services free guarantee. These great grilling and chilling deals are only happening for a limited time, so you must call as soon as possible. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Tennessee Volunteers and the Nashville Predators. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
I get a lot of respect for that football team. I mean, they're defending Super Bowl champs, obviously very talented, very well coached. And so when you start to put the schedule together and you make phone calls and you say, hey, you guys be interested in practicing, and we'll put you in, and you guys, if we get the game, which you usually do, you kind of coordinate something. Bruce is great to work with. So, we're excited to go down there and get a lot of good work in, competitive work, but obviously, taking care of each other also.
That was Vrabel talking about the Tampa Bay practices. Tomorrow morning they start. Bruce Arians came out and said he and Mike Vrabel have a no fighting rule that will be in place this weekend. Arians says no fighting. He and Mike agreed to it. Now, do we think that there will be any fighting in the Tampa Bay practices? The reason I bring this up is when the Patriots practiced a couple of years ago, I'm sure Vrabel and Belichick had a similar thing. That was a no fighting rule. Hey, we're not going to fight. There was one tiny little skirmish in the back of the end zone. I think it was AJ and maybe it was Corey Davis. And I remember Tajay Sharp running off the sidelines and Vrabel just basically shoving him back. I mean, you did this in any other job, you get fired.
Right.
And Vrabel just shoved Tajay Sharp back and basically told him to get back to the sidelines. But so Vrabel, and it was really nothing, honestly. In the grand scheme of we've seen real fights. But then remember a couple years ago when the Browns and the Colts had joint practices and Frank Reich had to blow it and said, we got to end practice because they were fighting too much. And then afterwards, Freddie Kitchens got up there and was like, we're not backing down from anybody. Give me another hamburger. And it's like, Freddie, you are a clown. Buddy, I think two veteran teams, I doubt we're going to see fighting at Titans-Bucs practice.
Yeah, I think these are two teams led by pretty level-headed guys in Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill. And there's a
Although
good amount
those guys wouldn't be doing the fighting because those guys aren't going to be doing anything like that.
But I also think that those guys lead teams in a way that they wouldn't tolerate that from their teams. And I think that there are enough guys on both the Bucs and the Titans that have been in the league long enough to know that if I fight, that's going to do quite literally nothing good for me and everything bad for me. I'm going to get hurt, I'm going to get disciplined, and I'm going to hurt my team in the process. I think if you're dealing with a lot of rookies on both sides, there could potentially be a little tussle there, maybe a little bit of friction there, guys who are new to the league.
So I don't think rookies are the ones that cause fights.
Who do you think causes fights?
Bad guys. Bad guys. Guys that are bad. And I think for the most part, the Titans have avoided those kind of players. Mm-hmm. Tampa Bay has Antonio Brown.
Tampa Bay has some bad guys.
They've got Ndamukong Suh. It looks like he's turned his reputation.
But also, I think if Tom says, hey, Antonio, bow down, stop, I think he would.
See, here's what's tough about the quarterbacks. I hear what you're saying. The quarterbacks don't do anything in these practices. When you see these fights in practice, normally it's two fat guys fighting because those are the guys that are pushing and shoving the most. It's normally two fat guys, and then it's the third guy that comes in to basically say, hey, knock it off. The third guy comes in, and then it's now you got 5 guys, and then it's 8 guys, and then it's, now you got to fight. Arians is kind of this just seems to me like Arians is a very laissez-faire coach. So if there's I'm not worried about the Titans because Vrabel didn't do that. If I had to be worried about it a little bit, I think I'd be worried about Arians, and I'd be worried about the Bucs. I'd be worried about them maybe getting into it a little bit. I'm trying to think. I don't know Jack Rabbit Jenkins well enough to know if he's somebody that would start something. I don't think Byard starts anything. I don't think Hooker starts anything. I told you, I don't think young guys start stuff. So I wouldn't worry about Fulton.
I guess they do
Farley.
kind of have the fear of God instilled upon them.
Yeah, they're just trying to make they're just trying to make the team. Even the good young players are really just trying to make the team.
Yeah.
Now, here's where I'd be weary of it. JPP, Taylor Lewan, those kind of guys, because they practiced a couple of years ago against each other. And I don't think there was any fighting or anything like that then. Was Arians the coach when they came in here? I want to say he wasn't. I want to say...
Was it Cutter?
I think it was Dirk Cutter. I think this was Cutter's last year. And it was weird because Ryan Fitzpatrick was the number 1 quarterback at the time in Tampa Bay because Jameis had a 4-game suspension to start the season. So it was kind of weird. Like, Jameis was out there just firing up the 3s because Jameis wasn't going to be with the 1s because Jameis had to sit out the first 4 games. But so I don't think we'll see any fighting, but we'll keep an eye on that as part of it tomorrow. I just hope we have enough good players out there. Like, I'm worried that the way that the NFL has completely devalued practice, and the Titans are at the top of the list, and maybe for good reason, I don't know. But, like, I'm worried I'm going to get out there tomorrow in Tampa, and I'm going to see Derrick Henry sitting over there with a Gatorade bottle in his hand, and it's going to be Mekhi Sargent and Daniel Munyer and Dylan Radins.
You were not high on Daniel Munyer.
I think he's the worst player on the team.
So, question for you. Does that worry you because the Titans starting guys will not be out there practicing against guys that are really talented, or does it bother you because you think the Titans are going to get embarrassed against the Bucs?
No, it bothers me because I'm going to Tampa to tell people what practice looks like, and I'm not sure people are going to be all that excited if it's Daniel Munyer. Like, that's... So, and again, you don't know... I felt like the Patriot practices 2 years ago were really good. Like, it was fun to be out there. I thought a lot got done. You know, I'm glad that both TD and I are going because I think, and I'll have to talk to TD about this, but the best strategy might be for on one day TD to be with the Titans defense and me to be with the Titans offense, and the next day for TD to be, switch it. Because I was going field to field at the Patriot practices, and so I felt like I saw enough, but Floyd focused on one side of the ball on those 2 days, and that might be the best route to go. But I'm excited to go. Like Kevin Byard said it last week when he said these are like games to go out there against Tampa Bay in practice. So I'm excited to see Evans versus Farley. Farley probably won't do that, but Jenkins might. Like, you might have Jenkins versus Evans. You might have AB in the slot against Chris Jackson. And you would say, oh, dear God, AB in the slot against Chris Jackson. Scotty Miller versus Elijah Molden. But guess what? That's who those are the guys you're going to have to play against in the NFL. Like, that's what I want to see. I mean, I think that's a great example of something that is important in Titans-Bucs practice. Chris Jackson versus Antonio Brown or Scotty Miller. Because if Chris Jackson is going to be the starting nickel back at the Tennessee Titans, and he was starting in the nickel at the beginning of last season, but if he's going to be the starting nickel, he's getting matched up with those players. Those caliber of guys. And Scotty Miller's pretty good, and we know AB's going to the Hall of Fame. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. But what I worry about is that, like, Dupree's not going to be out there. Mm-hmm. Farley's not going to be out there. Henry's not going to be out there. Julio Jones not going to be out there. Maybe A.J. Brown doesn't do much out there. And it's like, well, I mean, what do you get out of that if you don't send the guys out there to practice? At some point, and I'm not an expert on practice in the NFL, but at some point, don't the good players have to practice?
And doesn't that feel like the opportune time to practice? Because game 2 kind of feels like it's going to be the new game 3, and that the starters actually go out there maybe for a series, maybe a quarter, maybe a half.
Well, they're not going out for a half. And did you see Bruce Arians said yesterday he's not playing the starters in the preseason game.
In the preseason game, yeah.
So when I go down there and we're on the air for 2 days breaking down practice, that's going to be all you get out, anything you get out of Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because Brady's not going to play, and Evans and Godwin and Gronk and Brate and AB and Scotty Miller and Fournette and Ronald Jones Jr., they're not playing. They will not play on Saturday night against Titans. And I'm guessing you flip that around on defense, and you won't see.
But I think practice.
What are those DBs? Those Sean Murphy-Bunting. You won't see him out there. You won't see Shaquille Barrett. You won't see JPP. You won't see Ndamukong Suh. You won't see Vita Vea. You won't see Devin White. You won't see Levante David. I mean, we're talking great players. You're not going to see them Saturday night against the Titans. I feel bad for News 2 doing the games, and Bruce Arians is already coming out saying, yeah, Brady's not going to play in that game. I'm like, oh, man.
Might see a little bit of Kyle Trask out there.
Just pretend with me. Like, if I'm the news director at News 2 or whoever, the general manager or whatever at News 2, and we paid the Titans all this money to run these games, like, Bruce, at least pretend with me that Tom Brady may play. And especially if I'm the one who's paying the Bucs all the money to run their games. I would be like, Bruce, we only have 1 or 2 preseasons with Tom Brady as quarterback. You've got to let me pretend like we can run commercials that you could see Brady Saturday night. But they can't do it. 615-737-1025. Let's get to some of your texts when we got the text line. Which is driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com.
One texter texts in and says, do you think after a few practices and 1 preseason game that these players are what they are, or do you feel most will improve?
I think it's all on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. I look at it by position group. So if you can't play, like if you've got an entire second unit on your offensive line that can't play, so that we think Lawan is fine and Saffold's fine and Jones is fine and Davis is fine and that they'll figure it out at right tackle. But if everybody else can't play, then you're going to have a tough season because someone on the offensive line is going to get hurt at some point and somebody's going to have to go in and go play. And you don't have Dennis Kelly on the bench anymore. That is what I take away from this stuff. Now, could Breon Borders one day be a starting outside corner in the NFL? I guess. Maybe. But that's like an individual thing. Now, as far as, and I again, grouping these by positions, that's where I think you can come away from, boy, the receivers, it just looks great, or boy, the receivers, man, they just don't look very good. And I think that's kind of the way that I would assess things right now.
Ben texts into the text line, and we mentioned that Josh Reynolds was experiencing some soreness in his Achilles. He has an Achilles thing going on, so Ben texted in reference to that and said, just Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis. It goes away if you rest a couple of months. I ball on it daily now. I don't know if Josh Reynolds has a couple months.
Yeah, he didn't take a couple months. I mean, he didn't take a couple of months. And we heard that there was a shoulder issue as well. He didn't take a couple of months.
No.
I mean, that's going to be, my guess is.
I don't think he's willing to take a couple of months.
Probably a full season thing. As far as Josh Reynolds is
And no
concerned.
offense to Ben, I'm not really quite sure what kind of balling he does on the daily, but
Yeah,
I
you're
don't
not
think the
Josh Reynolds.
YMCA basketball league is going to be the same as an NFL quarter or an NFL wide receiver.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll hit the headlines with Caroline. We'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Stillman & Company. We are delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game tomorrow, you win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Participate tomorrow morning at 9:45 a.m. Ian, how do we feel about Nashville SC? I see they just keep winning.
They played very well the other night. They gave up a quick early goal, about 2.5 minutes in the third minute. They down 1-0, but quick response, went up, 3-1, and then they made it 3-2, but then Nashville turned it on late, got a late penalty. Alex Muils had knocked in a couple. CJ Sabong knocked in a couple. Mukhtar had a goal, nice goal. They looked pretty good.
Sounds like I picked the wrong Nashville SC game to watch.
5-2 the other night. They
when
had
I
some
watched
goals.
the New England game. Sounds like I picked the wrong one. Time for headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman and Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk, ESPN 102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
A little bit of breaking news today, and it was really just kind of a matter of time. We were just waiting to see when it would be, but the Seattle Seahawks bent the knee to Jamal Adams, and Jamal Adams is now the NFL's highest paid safety. Adams' new deal carries a max value of $72 million, $20 million signing bonus, $38 million guaranteed, and that will begin the first day of 2022. So Jamal Adams, now the highest paid safety in the NFL.
When are people going to catch on to the fact that he's just not that valuable?
I have a hard time thinking that anyone will ever believe that.
Like, is it because he got drafted to a team in New York? But I don't know what it is, because Jamal Adams is a safety who doesn't intercept the football.
He's a Pro Bowl safety.
He's a box linebacker. I mean, he is a linebacker. He is a box safety, which is not a valuable commodity in the NFL. And yet, highest paid safety in the league. Highest paid safety in the league, and he doesn't intercept the ball. Amazing.
He can sack.
But like,
he can do that.
But that's not a safety thing. Like, that's not a... Like, Logan Ryan had 4.5 sacks 2 years ago for the Titans, and he had like 4 interceptions. I'll take that guy over Jamal Adams. I mean, I don't... Look, Pete Carroll's a smart guy. He's a good football coach. Won a Super Bowl. I love Pete. Great guy. I don't know what Pete's doing there. What's next?
Another guy who got paid today, the 76ers, Joel Embiid, agreed to a Supermax contract today.
Dude, the money they're giving these NBA players, holy crap. Nobody even watches the league anymore, and these guys are getting $200 million.
I also think you just have a skewed view of it, because I don't think in this market people really care about the NBA that much, but in Philly, in New York, in LA, people care.
See, I think more people care about Major League Baseball than the NBA.
I have to disagree.
But see, if you look at the TV ratings, the way that ESPN would have you believe is that football's clearly number one, and then the NBA is right behind football, clearly number two, and then everything else. I think the NBA is right there with baseball for number two. And it certainly wasn't that way when Michael Jordan was in the league. But the money they're giving these players, but Embiid, I did see this, $196 million.
4 years, $196 million.
That is so much money.
So much money.
Like, that's $50 million.
$196 million.
That is $50 million a year.
And that's not even really that long of a contract.
No, 4 years,
$50
million a year. And
all
it's not
fully guaranteed.
It's not like he hasn't made money before this. I mean,
no, he's had massive contracts in the past.
$50 million a season.
But this is all in his favor. I mean, it's all fully guaranteed. He has a player option in that final year of the deal, the 2026-2027 season. I mean, this has essentially no downsides for Joel Embiid. I mean, it's not like he's locked in Philly for the rest of his career. If he really wants to leave somewhere in the 2026-2027 season, he's more than welcome to.
Well, and not only that, I think the other part of it, too, is in basketball, players run the league anyway. So if they sign a big contract and they don't like it, 5 minutes later, they demand a trade. They're somewhere else.
That's another thing that Adam Silver wanted to consult LeBron about continuing the play-in games. Why is Adam Silver asking LeBron James about the playing games? Why are we letting the players control this league? I understand that LeBron is probably single-handedly the biggest moneymaker for the NBA, but since when do commissioners consult players about the decisions the league is going to make?
So it's funny you say that. I watched the documentary on the Malice in the Palace on Netflix, and Jim Gray, who used to cover the NBA for a long time, he was a sideline reporter for NBC when they had the NBA, and Jim Gray was talking about the Malice in the Palace, and he was asked about why, there was a big split on the way the punishments were handed out, and he said, who got punished? When Gray asked why this turned the NBA, who got punished? So the players. Who did the punishing? Stern. So that David Stern basically flexed his muscles on Ron Artest, Steven Jackson, and Jermaine O'Neal to say, hey, I'm the commissioner, you're the players. Whereas Adam Silver, it feels like, has gone the exact opposite direction in the NBA. And I have to be honest, player empowerment, I think, is good for the player. I'm not sure it's good for the game.
I agree with you. And when would Roger Goodell ever consult Tom Brady about the way that they conduct their postseason, the way that they do the playoffs? I don't think ever. And I think that's a very dangerous line that Adam Silver is walking there with LeBron James.
What's next?
Also, according to the Detroit News, former Lions corner Alex Brown is facing 4 charges, 2 counts of operating while intoxicated.
Who is that? Is he a good player? I've never heard of this guy.
I don't know if he's a good player or not, but he doesn't play for the Lions anymore, so it doesn't really matter. So
4 charges of what?
So 2 charges of operating while intoxicated, operating a vehicle while intoxicated, 2 counts of reckless driving causing serious injury because he was in the car with Lions tight end Charlie Tamapeo. So he crashed his car early Sunday morning. Tamapeo is dealing with injuries with that now. Brown was waived on Sunday. Tamapeo was waived on Monday with non-football injury designation. Not sure what they will do with him moving forward, but a statement from the Lions on the matter. They said, we're aware of the situation on Sunday involving Alex Brown. He was waived from the team Sunday. Driving under the influence is a matter we take very seriously, yada, yada, yada. The Lions have basically said, we don't agree with what he did. We don't agree with those actions. But, I mean, the Lions, tough team to be dealing with. It would be tough to be a Lions fan.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions, they look like one of these teams that doesn't even really have an answer of how to get out of the hole they're in.
Right.
Like, there's no way. It's like the Texans feel that way right now. There used to be a commercial where they said, do you feel like you're in debt and that debt is insurmountable and unbelievable to get out of? Well, call 1-800-GET-OUT-OF-DEBT today and let our experts help you. And it shows a guy throwing a ladder into a hole of like a way to get out of debt or whatever, which I thought was great imagery. But you look at the Lions, you look at some of these teams, and I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see the light. Like even the Jets feel that way. I do not see a light at the end of the tunnel for some of these teams. Detroit is certainly up there as one of them, especially with Coach Kook doing his up downs. Those are headlines with Caroline. 615-737-1025. Mike Tannenbaum had a take, and I wonder, is this a hot take, or is this the reality and a reason why Titans fans should actually feel good about a situation that, quite frankly, I think we already feel good enough about, but maybe another reason to do so? We'll get into that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, Stillman and Company, right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Go to theGameNashville.com and check out Nashville's best deals. This week's deal is from Joyland in East Nashville. Joyland is a fun new concept by Chef Sean Brock, designed to spread joy through his love of cheeseburgers, shakes, fries, fried chicken, and buttermilk biscuits. Get half off a $25 gift card now at theGameNashville.com while they last. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company, Tim Tebow released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know why, but I love it. Like, I love that news today. I am so glad. It's like, Tebow, be gone. Like, be gone and don't come back. Like that, hit the road, Jack, and don't come back.
With Tebow, Tebow is like a boomerang. Every time he gets bounced from one thing, when he gets bounced from the Mets, he comes back and he's on the SEC Network, and then he goes to the Jags, so he'll get bounced from the Jags, and he'll probably come back and contribute to NFL Live now that he's one of the greats.
See, you worked at ESPN, so maybe you feel a little differently. Like, to me, being on SEC Network for Tebow is, like, almost embarrassing for Tebow.
Why do you think so?
Because SEC Network is... Like, who really watches SEC Network? Like, I watch the games.
Watch SEC Network.
I watch the games.
You hate college football, so you wouldn't watch it.
No. I have my buddy is on that show, and I don't watch it.
Well, maybe you're just a bad friend, and you hate college football.
I watch the other show. I watch College Game Day. Like, I mean, no disrespect to Jordan, but I don't hear
the SEC show and College Game Day do seem a bit cannibalistic. But there are people out there that could give two poops about Iowa State and really would rather hear about Mississippi State, Kentucky
the SEC
than
shows.
anything else in college football.
The SEC show's terrible. I mean, like, Laura Rutledge is fine.
She's not on anymore.
Who's the main host?
Is she?
Now?
Because now she's on NFL Live. She may be doing both.
But I think last year was
that woman works her butt off.
It was Laura Rutledge. Jordan Rogers, Tebow, and Roman Harper.
Spears.
No, Spears is on NFL. It was Roman Harper. And I couldn't do Harper, and I couldn't do Tebow. And honestly, like...
It may be Alyssa Lang now.
They spend too much time... Oh, great. They spend too much time doing, they spend too much time sitting there being like, all right, Mississippi State on the road at Missouri. We sit down with Coach Eli Drinkwitz. Coach, what do you make of that? Like, no, thank you. I would argue that, for Tebow... That is a huge step down. Like,
from what?
From the level of fame that Tebow wants and is accustomed to. Like, ESPN is not good enough for Tebow. Like, he needs to be...
That sounds like more of a Tebow problem than an SEC Network problem.
Like, he needs to be like Michael Strahan for him to justify the level of fame that he wants.
That's what's next. Tebow will be on Good Morning America.
I think he already has been on Good
Morning America. My God.
I wouldn't be surprised if he got on some
I think he
Today
did some,
show or
like
something
like
that.
a Regis and Kelly type of show.
I think he's done some corresponding for Good Morning.
What does he correspond with?
I don't know. So, anywho, Mike Tannenbaum was talking about Tebow's team, the Jags. And it sounds like the Jags are a mess. I didn't watch the Jags preseason game, but apparently it was abysmal. Like one of those top-to-bottom showings that was terrible. And Mike Tannenbaum was on ESPN, general manager, and said that team is so bad and that offensive line is so horrible that he would sit Trevor Lawrence if he was the general manager. Take a listen.
4 sacks, 8 pressures. This is the first time that Urban Meyer is going out there and he's not trotting out 5 first-round picks. If I'm them, I'm learning from Zach Taylor's massive mistake a year ago when they started Joe Burrow in Cincinnati and he got hurt. I'm either going to start Gardner Minshew, despite it being unpopular, or I'm going to try to run the ball a lot more. I'm going to be scared to death if I'm Urban Meyer watching that offensive line the other night.
Okay, let's take ticket sales out of this. Like, let's just say you own the team and all you cared about was the long-term future of your ball club and winning and losing games. Now, we know owners are too short-sighted for that, right?
Yes, because the owners see their first-round pick, their first overall pick, probably the amount of money that they've sold or the amount of money that they've made in selling Trevor Lawrence jerseys. I think they see dollar signs over protecting their future investment.
I mean, we lived it here with Vince Young. When the team was bad and Kerry Collins was the quarterback and Bud Adams told Jeff Fisher, you're fired if you don't play him, Vince Young got in there. Like we've lived that life. And I hear that and I think one of two things. One, wow, what a disaster. Urban Meyer, who has gone into every game he has coached for the last 16 years with a better offensive line than the team he's playing. And you could ruin that kid.
Yeah.
Like, you could ruin him. If you put him out there and you just sack him into eternity, you could ruin him. Ian, remember the difference with Marcus Mariota when he had DeMarco Murray in the running game? Mm-hmm. And then after the broken leg at Jacksonville in 2016, he was never the same player again. That broken leg And again, you see guys break their legs all the time. They break their leg, they come back to fine. Never the same player again. Was hearing feet in the pocket all the time. David Carr was taken first overall by the Houston Texans in their first draft ever. So the Texans have the expansion draft. They take David Carr out of Fresno State with the first overall pick. And David Carr was sacked so many times that by the end of his tenure with the Texans, he literally heard footsteps every time he got the ball.
Led the league in sacks that year, getting sacked. 76 times sacked his rookie year.
My gosh.
Never the same player after that.
Well, I don't blame him.
But that's my point with Lawrence. I mean, I would say this with Trevor Lawrence. He looks like he's got the potential to be a pretty good quarterback. As a Titan fan, I would tell you all, the one thing we got to be worried about is just like Peyton in Indianapolis, they weren't very good. Peyton wasn't good that first year, but then all of a sudden they got Edgerrin James and Bill Polian built a good team, and Peyton Manning was Peyton Manning, and the next thing you know, they're 13-3. And it happened, it took 1 year, they were 13-3, they realigned the divisions, and then you had to play Peyton Manning every year, and it sucked. And I worry about that. Just like Indianapolis when they were bad and they got Andrew Luck. And everybody's been selling us Trevor Lawrence for years and years and years and years. I mean, I'm worried that Cincinnati might ruin Joe Burrow or might have already ruined Joe Burrow.
I think they may have. They're on their way.
And so, but I don't have to play Joe Burrow every year. With Lawrence, I think of what Tannenbaum said, and I look at it as a Titan fan, and I think, do I want Lawrence to play with that bad offensive line? And then all of a sudden, for him to not be able to develop into the quarterback that he's capable of developing in? And this goes back to if you own the team and the general manager came to you. Now, their general manager is Trent Baalke, and he's just a nobody anyways. But if you really believed in your general manager and he came up to you and he said, boss, we got to start Gardner. And you're thinking to yourself, I just wrote this guy a $28 million check. What are you talking about? I got to start Gardner Minshew. If we get this kid killed this year, it's going to ruin his career. So we need to hand him a clipboard. We need to say, hey, we think he's come a long way. We really believe in him, but it's not about him. It's about how bad this line is. Would you be okay with doing that?
If I'm a general manager, yes. Do I think that most general managers in the NFL would be okay with it?
You're the owner. You're the owner here. This is an owner call.
Owner.
So I'm general manager, you're owner, and I'm saying, look, we got to play Gardner Minshew because this kid's going to get killed.
I'm not going to like it because, like you said, I just paid him a boatload of money, and he's the guy that is getting people in this city excited about this Jaguars team.
And your customers are coming
to watch him.
To watch him play.
To watch him. So if I'm an owner, I don't like it. Because if I'm an owner, I say, well, what value is he sitting on the bench with a clipboard watching the games on the sidelines, to which a general manager or a head coach could say, well, what value is he to this team with a brace, with a knee brace?
I think the question is, what value is he to the team if you ruin him?
Exactly.
Then he has no value.
He has no value. He has potential value. He has future value if you sit him this year. If you say, we're gonna develop this offensive line, we're gonna invest in our offensive linemen, so next year he can come out and we can protect him.
Does what Mike Tannenbaum said ease our fear that Jacksonville could be a surprise team this year?
If Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback, yes.
Well, I don't think Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback. I think it's going to be Lawrence with that beat-up offensive line.
But what I saw from the Jags preseason game, I'm not worried. I never really was worried about the Jags being a actual threat this year. I thought maybe down the line, Trevor Lawrence gets a little bit more experience. Urban Meyer can prove himself a little bit more. This year, I was never worried about them, especially after what I saw from the preseason game. I'm not worried about the Jags.
I couldn't tell in the preseason game whether or not it was like pressure or if Trevor Lawrence was just holding on to the ball too long.
There's a little bit of both.
Like, I couldn't figure that out. Like, was he just trying to make a play? There was maybe once or twice where I saw he got sacked, where it looked like he maybe could have made the throw, but almost like he was trying to do too much. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Their offensive line does not grade out very well according to the ESPN grades here.
25th worst in the league.
So, I mean, yeah, they have it at a 0.5, grade scale in the red. So maybe their offensive line really is that bad, but I mean, I don't know. I do think Trevor Lawrence will get good quick. I don't think it'll take very long.
615-737-1025. Titans and the Bucks getting set for joint practices in Tampa. and why I think maybe one Bucks writer is a little too optimistic about what we may or may not see. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. TriStar Moving, they are the presenting sponsors of this radio show, and I have been telling you all about TriStar Moving for a while. My most recent experience with TriStar, I hate moving. Everybody hates moving. Trust me, you hate the actual act of it, but when you use TriStar Moving, it's so easy that you actually kind of like it. Like you enjoy using TriStar Moving because they are so stress-free. That's why their motto is TriStar Movers with 5-star service. From the initial phone call to the final signature, moving was a breeze. They offer home protection covering your floors, banisters, railings, door jambs, and even the doors themselves. They are always upping the game when it comes to mover training. They took care of everything, and the mattresses were placed in protective bags and TVs in protective boxes. They even have a state-of-the-art storage facility in case you need a safe place for all of your belongings. The owners, Garrett and Robert, are true Nashvillians, and they truly care about helping their hometown. This company is the real deal, and they are on the rise quickly, and I can attest to that. So give my friends at TriStar Moving a call, 615-640-1219, or visit their website, nashvillemoving.org/radio. They will give you 5% off your entire move. nashvillemoving.org/radio. Tell them Jared Stillman sent you for 5% off your entire move. TriStar Moving, my official movers. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025. The game, the Titans are in the air on their way to Tampa Bay. I will be joining them shortly in the air, not on the same plane, since their plane has already left.
You probably should be invited on their plane at this point.
I'm not sure that would go over very well.
Well, it's worth a shot.
You know, it's funny. I've done all that before, because when I worked in women's hoops and when I worked at U of L, like I've flown, like team planes and charter jets and
fancy pants,
boosters, private planes. Like I've done all that.
Excuse me.
I don't like the team plane.
Why not?
Because everybody has to kiss butt on the team plane.
Like everyone not on the team?
Yeah, so if you are the CEO of Pepsi, right? Now, the CEO of Pepsi probably flies his own private jet wherever, and so he's not there. But take like a big corporate sponsor of the Titans who's local, right? That owns a business locally, and if they get invited on the team plane, it's like cool to go on the team plane. You can tell your buddies like, oh yeah, I'm flying on the team plane.
Right, but you got to schmooze.
You got to sit down and shut up. You better not be on the team plane. I don't like that. I don't like, I kind of like being on the plane, kind of just doing whatever I want to do. I don't want to have to sit there and, hey, don't say anything to the coach. Because I would sit there and play and be like, Vrabel, why you do that, what you do? That kind of thing.
Are you one of those people who talks to people on the plane? I feel like you are.
Can I be honest with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
When I was single, if I was on the plane and like that kind of thing, like, oh, yeah, tell me more about yourself.
What you reading? What crossword are you doing?
Like, I flew to New York one time. There was this girl who was like actually like a model. I think she's dating like some musician or something. And she was sitting next to me on a flight to New York. Her and I talked the whole trip. We talked the whole time. Normally, if it's like, normally I don't talk to the person next to me. So
yeah, I sit down, AirPods go in, don't talk to me. World is out. This is my flight. This is my Zen time.
Like, no matter what the situation in your personal life was, no matter who sits down next to you.
Well, if it's like the president of the United States that sits down next to me, like I might strike up a convo, but for the most part, no.
Okay, so I think, again, it just depends on the situation.
Yes.
The Athletic has an article. Greg Allman, who I guess covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it has the storylines to watch and Titans and Bucks joint practices. It should be noted that we, of course, will be there tomorrow. And it says, here's the headline. Derrick Henry versus Tampa's run defense, ? Julio Jones reunion, ? Storylines to watch in Bucks Titans joint practices. And the number one thing to watch, Derrick Henry versus the NFL's number one rush defense. Number 2, Tom Brady reunites with Mike Vrabel. I mean, that is kind of funny. They usually have a couple of jokes on each other, so that's probably going to be fun. Bucks pass rush versus Titans offensive line. Julio Jones one more time, since Julio Jones is no longer in the division. More familiar faces, and it talks about John Robinson and Luke Stocker and Jeremy McNichols and guys like that. When I look at these storylines, I think to myself, I would love to sell this to everybody out there that I'm going down to Tampa tomorrow to watch a practice that you can't watch, and I will tell you Derrick Henry against the NFL's number one rush defense, what that will look like. And yet I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to play Derrick Henry in these practices. We know he's not going to play him in the game on Saturday. I mean, the Titans, this is what I think Vrabel's done. Vrabel probably, and this is total speculation, but he probably looks back at how things were in his day. 2-a-days, pads every day, hitting everybody, getting in the cold tub.
Ball is everything.
I mean, they worked him so hard that a guy died because of it. And now once Corey Stringer died, things changed for forever. Then CBAs get ratified and the players want to work less and the owners don't have to lose any money to practice less. So yeah, go ahead. I can promise you the ABC affiliate in Tampa that probably carries those games, or NBC affiliate or whomever carries the Tampa Bay Buccaneers games, that they're not going to like it, but they're not paying less money to the Buccaneers to show the game on Saturday night because Tom Brady's not playing. So I think they'll be okay with it. So Vrabel looks back at how tough those practices were in his day. And now he's not allowed to do that. And Vrabel was a PA guy when he was in the league. So he knows he's not allowed to do that. He knows that if he takes it one step further, then the union's going to complain, and now it's on his butt. So he probably looks at it like, Well, I mean, I'm not going to risk Derrick Henry getting thumped when he can't do anything anyways. Like I'm handcuffed by what I can actually get done in practice. So I'm not going to have Derrick Henry try to go 80% knowing that we're not allowed to push him the extra 20% and risk Derrick Henry getting hurt in that scenario and the wear and tear and the load on his body or things like that. I'm sure he's not interested in that. And so when I look at these practices, you'll see Tannehill and you'll see Brady, which will be good. And you'll see guys that are going to be vital to the Titans' success this year, like Byard against Brady. But you're not going to see, I don't think you're going to see Julio Jones out there for 2 days going against Sean Murphy-Bunting of the Buccaneers. I don't think you're going to see I think there's a lot to get out of it, but I think there's going to be a lot still left in the tank that it feels like when I read this article, it's like selling about what's it going to look like with Derrick Henry in practice. I say all of this to then throw out the other side, switch sides to the side of the table, say, if you're not going to practice Derrick Henry because you want to lighten the workload and you don't want to use all of his carries in August when you're going to ask him to carry it 30 times in September and 30 times in October and 30 times in November and 30 times in December and hopefully 30 times in January, wouldn't this be the one time that you want him out there? Wouldn't this be the one time that you want Julio Jones to give you a little full go? That if there was anything that would get you ready for the start of the season, it's this. It's, okay, Arizona's in 3 weeks, I think. Let's go full go for 2 days at Tampa Bay. You take off a little bit of time, and then next thing you know, you're getting ready for Arizona. You're getting ready for that first Cardinals game. So I say this, and I'm like, there's no way Henry's going to do much tomorrow. There's no way that there's And then I also say, maybe. Like maybe Vrabel says, okay, these 2 practices, I want to put all the guys out there. I want them to practice. Maybe holding guys out at the end of last week because he didn't want to put them out there because he wants to make sure they're ready for the Bucs practices. Because it's one thing to look at the game tape in practice and say, hey, you got beat by our guy. It's another thing to say, Chris Jackson in the slot, you're getting beat by Antonio Brown or Scotty Miller. Because those are the guys you got to play. That's who you have to play. So I don't know what approach Vrabel's going to take over the next 2 days. But my gut tells me not a lot of Henry, not a lot of Julio.
But I just feel like since the beginning of training camp, we haven't seen a whole lot of Derrick Henry or a whole lot of Julio. But I think there was always something in the back of my mind of of course, they're not going to play in these training camps, these practices early on. But come Tampa Bay, come the practices where they'll actually face defenses at the level that they will face in the regular season, that feels like the opportune time. Throw Derrick Henry out there for a few series in practice. Throw him out there. Knock the rust off so you're not knocking the rust off in week 1.
So training camp, I think, is over after this week. Like, quote unquote training camp.
Right.
Then it's just regular practice. So when you get to regular practice, there's less players on your team because you got to make cuts even into that 3rd preseason game. So when there's less practice, it means there's less reps, which means the other guys have to practice more. I do think that Vrabel thinks that these guys don't need training camp and that once they start regular practice, they'll be fine, and everything that gets ready for the Arizona game is all that matters to Julio Jones and Derrick Henry. Whereas maybe another guy, Woodrow Hamilton IV, needs training camp to prove that he can make the team. I don't know how Vrabel feels. And the thing about Vrabel is he'll just say everybody has their own individual system that we think is in the best interest of the team. And he'll never explain his actual thinking of how you get from point A to point B to point C.
Will you be disappointed if you don't see the Derrick Henrys, the A.J. Browns?
Derrick, no. A.J. Julio, yes. Starting DBs, yes. I want to see Farley out there. I want Lewan out there in those pass rush drills. I know Dupree's not going to do anything out there.
Right.
So Derrick Henry and Bud Dupree I can live with. I don't think they're going to have Farley out there doing, like team period stuff. Like I don't think Farley's going up against Chris Godwin, which is what I want to see.
That makes me nervous.
That he has no experience and then they stick him out there week 1?
That this is his first NFL year and they're going to stick him out there week 1, no practice. Minimal practice. I don't want to say no practice. That makes me nervous. Derrick Henry, he'll be fine. Julio Jones, hopefully he'll be fine.
Do you think the fans care about this? Like, do you think the fans And I think that fans, the way I looked at it was I was either going to go to SEC Media Days or I was going to go to Titans-Bucks practice, and it wasn't much of a discussion for me. No disrespect to SEC Media Days, but it's the same every year. We bring on so-and-so from The Athletic who covers the SEC. So who do you think this year's going to win? I guess Marcus Spears doesn't do SEC Network anymore, but Chris Doring joins us now. Chris, what do we think about LSU's chances? Is it like, whereas this is, Titans-Bucks practice that you can't see on TV. But do you think the fans are dialed into how this looks as far as their feelings for this season?
If they're not now, then week 1 or week 2, then
they're not coming until football starts.
Yes. I think there are some fans that are a little bit concerned about the amount of practice that these players have had.
I do wonder how they'll handle the practice versus the games. Each team this week. Like how much are they going to put them in practice versus how much they plan on playing them in the game. Like if they're not planning on playing a lot in the game, are they going to go full bore at practice?
Right. Like I doubt you're going to see Derrick Henry in the game.
Sure.
Right. Like if they go full bore in practice, do they play less in the game? Like I wonder how they'll kind of go about each team will go about that. If it will be universal or if they'll each just say, hey, we're just doing our own thing and y'all just adjust.
615-737-1025. Headlines with Caroline is next. We're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. I should tell everybody that we are headed down to Tampa Bay later today for the Titans-Bucks practice because ESPN 1025 The Game is bringing you Nashville's best coverage of Titans training camp, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans, Frontier Basement Systems, the all-thing basement-y company, the Trenches Shop Gallery and Boutique, and the Cut Truck Mobile, Nashville's new barbershop on wheels. You have control of the time and place. Book your appointment at thecuttruckmobile.org. We're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company, delivered by TriStar Moving. Let's give something away. I'm in a good mood. How about that? Joe Rexroad in just a little bit. Be caller 5-615-737-1025. Now you'll win a pair of tickets to see Bush and Stone Temple Pilots at First Bank Amphitheater on Monday, October 11th. Those are your kind of bands, right, Ian?
Yeah, a little bit old school. You
STP?
know? Yeah, Stone Temple Pilots, Bush. It makes me feel like I'm in middle school again a little bit in the late 90s. But, yeah.
There you go.
Solid
What was middle
bands.
school for you, by the way?
Middle school for me was like 2000, like 9, 10, 11.
Gosh. All right, time for headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman and Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk, ESPN 102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
So the NHL owners have approved jersey ads for the 2022-23 season. Yeah, so the Board of Governors unanimously voted to approve the ad policy so they can have it's 3 inches by 3.5 inch patches on the jerseys, so a little bit bigger than the ones on the NBA. So last season, the NHL allowed them to put ads on helmets, but this season, they're saying you can expand it to the jersey. Gary Bettman, NHL commissioner, said teams retained more than $100 million through adding the ads on the helmet. So you can only assume this is a money thing because the NHL is headed for a flat cap moving forward.
Sure. I mean, I think that what this is, we were going to head this way anyways.
Yeah.
Basketball had already done it, and we were going to head this.
And
baseball.
why not?
I mean, like, I thought it was embarrassing, and I did not know this. It's a crazy story. I don't play video games, but when the pandemic hit, I was like, and remember early on, it was like, oh, we might have to shut everything down, everybody stay home. I was like, what am I going to do? So I bought a PlayStation, I bought the baseball game, and I played a little bit, and I saw the little Nike.
It's a fun game.
I saw the little Nike logo right there on the kind of the, the shoulder, and I'm like, wait a minute. That's usually off to the side. Like, now we've got it, like, on the chest part of the shoulder.
Proudly displayed right on the front.
And I saw people were upset about that. And I get it. Like, it's weird to see a swoosh on a Yankee logo, on a Yankee uniform like that. But then when I saw it in the Field of Dreams game, I was like, oh, goodness gracious, get out of here with that.
Why? Why does it matter?
Because it's just not, that's not a throwback.
It doesn't change the way that you view the
It's
game.
not throwback-ish to have that Nike logo there. But
I mean, is there a person climbing up on the scoreboard manually changing the score? That's not throwback enough for you, but the swoosh throws it off?
A little bit.
When you're wearing a funky hat and a sweater vest?
I am against jersey ads. And here's why I'm against jersey ads. Because it feels low class to me. In my lifetime of pro sports, do you know what the first jersey ad league was for me that I noticed it?
What?
Ocean Spray. Like the cranberry juice? They were I think they were the proud sponsors of the Nashville Cats when they played in the Arena Football League. And then I think it was Bridgestone maybe, or Firestone, or something like that. And they had their logo. And then I want to say Amoco, the gas station. They had, and like, I used to think, yeah, that's arena football. Like, that's low class. And now it's made its way to the NBA. And you see Bumble logos on jerseys. And I don't think it's low class like I did when it was arena football. I still don't think it's, if the NFL were to do it, and I'm sure they will at some point, if the NFL were to do it, I'd be embarrassed. So I'm kind of embarrassed the NHL's doing it. I'm against it.
I mean, it doesn't change anything for me. It's a way for the league to make more money. It doesn't bother me at all.
Oh,
I mean, look at NASCAR. The whole thing is a moving, breathing ad. You just hate NASCAR. Don't give me that look.
Well, I'm trying to go about saying how we're talking about class, and now we bring up NASCAR.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying,
at least
it's
trying
not
to class
a
up
new
NASCAR.
thing
I'll give
in
them that.
sports. I mean, if you're watching a
I don't like
baseball
it.
game,
I don't like it.
How many ads you see? You pause
Don't
the
like
game.
it. Don't like
how
it.
many
It's
ads?
on the jersey. I can't stand it. What's next?
So, the Las Vegas Raiders are the first NFL team to announce that they will
this.
require all game attendees to provide proof of COVID-19 vaccination. So all fans in the arena can attend the game without wearing a mask. That'll go into effect on September 19th in their home opener against Baltimore. Owner Mark Davis said health and safety have always been our number one priority. This policy ensures that we will be able to operate at full capacity without masks or fully vaccinated fans for the entire season. The Raiders will also offer vaccinations on site at Allegiant Stadium prior to Raiders home games, so newly vaccinated fans are allowed to attend with masks.
I love all of this. Who had the Raiders as the team that was going to be the ones to do this? Like, is that not the most surprising? Like, if it was the 49ers, or if it
Rams,
was the Chargers, or if it was the Jets and the Giants, or the Raiders?
The Raiders.
Like, Nevada is not an overly liberal place, and Las Vegas certainly is Sin City. You would think, I mean, it's kind of like Las Vegas. You come here and you end up with hepatitis. I mean, it is what it is.
You know what happens in Vegas.
Right. And so who would have thought the Raiders and Mark Davis would have been the ones to do this? I love it. I wish every team in the league would do this because it allows two things. One, you got to get the vaccine. You want to go to a game. Don't want to go to a game? Fine. Don't get it.
But you're right to go to a game.
But then they also give people the opportunity to get the vaccine, which it's not hard to get the vaccine right now. But I appreciate that. I think it's great on the Raiders' part. I love it. What's next?
You mentioned the Field of Dreams game earlier.
Yes, I did.
The Field of Dreams game will return in August of 2022 in Dyersville, Iowa, and it will feature the Cubs versus the Reds. We mentioned
we said it was
a few
gonna be
days
the Cubs,
ago it was going to be the
yeah.
Cubs or one of those kind of like blue blood original MLB teams. So Cubs, Reds in Iowa in 2022.
And I'm going to guess 2023 off the Red Sox.
Probably.
So I like it. It's fine. It won't have the buzz that this year had, but it'll be fine. I just hope it doesn't become the Winter Classic where nobody outside of the two teams that are supposed to be in it cares.
I think it might start to become that.
It's definitely going to be.
Yeah, because when you do it every year, it loses its
It
allure,
does,
but it
it
needs to happen every year.
Right. You can't build that stadium out there in the middle of a cornfield and play one game.
Because if you build it, they'll come.
They'll come. They may not watch anymore after the first time, but they'll come at least once.
Come.
Those are headlines with Caroline. Caroline! Titans and Bucks getting set to practice. Joe Rexroad will join us coming up next. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. And, of course, we're streaming on the Game Nashville app.
Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. The Titans are headed to Tampa Bay, and Jared Stillman will be hitting the road to Tampa soon enough as well. So with that, we welcome in Joe Rexrode into the show. Joe, first and foremost, had some breaking news today. Tim Tebow cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Were you just floored? Were you so incredibly shocked when you heard this news?
Well, I will say, I didn't think it would happen this fast. Like, I figured Urban would, do his guy a solid, at least give him, 2 preseason games. But, I guess Urban probably saw the same film we did of Tebow, playing patty cake instead of blocking. So I guess it's back to TV for Tebow or another sport maybe.
That's what we said. We said, God forbid if we see Tim Tebow out there on the court, the basketball court in the NBA, playing for the Lakers this season, I'm just going to absolutely lose it. But, I have to ask, did you ever expect to see Tim Tebow on the roster for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Because I forgot who it was. But a writer for ESPN, I believe it was the Jacksonville Jaguars beat writer for ESPN, said that was his bold prediction, was that Tim Tebow would make the roster for the Jags.
Yeah, I think that was Mike DeRocco.
Yes, you're right. It was Mike
DeRocco. He needs a lot of freezing cold takes retweets right now. No, I didn't think he would make it. I thought that he would get closer than this, just because, again, the pre-existing relationship. He was a good athlete, so it's like, hey, something like that is possible. Shoot, when he came out as a quarterback, I said, yeah, he should be a tight end. He might be good. But man, I haven't even thought about the basketball court. He probably could shoot threes better than Russ. So cool. They do need more shooting on that team, and they are old. So don't count it out.
Lakers, add on to that median age that they already have going on there. But like exactly. I mentioned, the Titans will travel to Tampa Bay today for joint practices for the rest of the week, ending in a preseason game this weekend. But it was announced, Mike Vrabel says he does not intend to see Julio Jones in Tampa Bay. He does not expect Julio Jones to travel for practices with the Bucs. Now, we had you on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about Julio not practicing. Did it concern us? It was only August something, and were we going to be concerned about Julio Jones? Now, it's a little bit later in the season. We're in the preseason. We're getting closer to week 1. Julio Jones most likely will not travel to Tampa Bay. Are we allowed to be concerned about Julio not practicing and a potential injury that could be worse than we think?
I'd hold off on that at this point. And, the injury part, just watching him walk around, he was jogging around yesterday. He's out on the exercise bike. I really don't think it's, there's no discernible boot or, sleeve or brace or anything like that. So I'd hold off on concern. I think that I'm not surprised, that he's not involved this week. I think next week, I said this on the show this morning, I said I would target next week as an expectation for some level of involvement for Julio. And again, had he not had the little stumble, he was starting to get weaved into practice. But I think if let's say he can go next week a little bit, and I have no idea if that would mean any kind of reps against Chicago in the one preseason game here. But if he can get in there, then you still got basically 3 weeks of practice before the opener, and that would also mean, just the availability for extra time with Tannehill, which to me is the most important thing, just the timing and, sharing notes on different things when you're actually going against defenses. So I would say even if it's not next week, but the week after, fine. Now, if you get to game week and that's when you're first getting, Tannehill and Julio back together, you got to expect some growing pains with that early in the season. It's not like the schedule is super easy early either.
Right, exactly. And I think that was my concern was I understand that there were several Atlanta residents, Falcons fans who said, hey, Julio Jones never practiced when he was in Atlanta. And I get that. I hear that. Right. But this is a completely new offense. This is a new system. This is a new system for Titans players. This is a new quarterback that he's with. So not getting those reps, I think, concerned me. But then again, like you mentioned, we can wait a couple weeks, and then I'll start to get my warning light going off. But another wide receiver that is a cause for concern, Josh Reynolds, mentioned yesterday at the practice at Nissan Stadium that he is dealing with some sort of Achilles something, not necessarily a tear, but an irritation in his Achilles. And Josh Reynolds came in before Julio Jones was acquired by the Titans. He came in, and I think Titans fans, I think we were fully prepared to have Josh Reynolds be that wide receiver too. So he'll most likely be in that slot role. He'll supposed to play a big role for the Titans. Could this be something that affects Josh Reynolds that could affect the Titans down the road?
Yeah, well, the thing is, had it just been like an availability yesterday, and he's talking about that stuff, I mean, obviously that's an eyebrow raiser, Achilles stuff or whatever he said. That's like, okay, that's not like a little ankle sprain. But of course, he said it, Caroline, after a burst of speed, catching a 50-yard bomb from Tannehill, and out fighting Christian Fulton, on a downfield pass, the play of the day yesterday, and some other moments where he looked fast and explosive. So, I mean, I guess I think what you see a lot of times is, people or athletes don't like to specify injuries until they feel like they're done with them or close to it. I mean, he looks pretty good based on yesterday. So, I mean, there is always the possibility of a setback, ups and downs in that. But, I mean, certainly the way he ran yesterday was unlike how he had been running in camp, which is kind of ginger. I mean, to me, it's like if you have an Achilles thing, why are you running at all? But, I mean, obviously, it's some kind of a strain, right? I mean, if there was any sort of even partial tear, he wouldn't be out there. So I mean, look, I think overall it was a good day to see him do that. And let's see if he can stack that and keep it going this week. And he also confirmed, the spring he missed a lot of it, and that was coming off shoulder surgery. So he's had the upper body and the lower body in hockey terms. And if he's back now, then I think it's Josh Reynolds and Marcus Johnson battling for that third receiver role. Because I'll tell you what, Marcus Johnson has put in work to really stake a claim to that.
We're talking to Joe Rexrode, host of Robbie and Rexrode here on 102.5 The Game. Talking Josh Reynolds said he had an Achilles thing going on, and Joe mentioned in practice Josh Reynolds didn't look necessarily explosive. But, I mean, you mentioned Marcus Johnson. I have loved everything that I've seen from Marcus Johnson that I've seen in practice. I feel like every day, 88 plus, check, like what I've seen so far. Do you think if Josh Reynolds is out maybe a week, needs to rest that Achilles, we could see Marcus Johnson in a starting slot role?
I really do. Yeah. And, and as far as, and that's what's interesting too, in terms of the slot, I actually think it'll be interesting. They've had Adam Humphries and he was dedicated, like he was going to be in the slot. If he was on the field, that's where he was going to be. But I think this year we're going to see like A.J. Brown in there a lot. Like I think they want to be more interchangeable. Now, sometimes it does help to have like a true slot receiver. And if they were going to do that, someone like a Mason Kinsey, a Cam Batson, guys like that might fit that. But I look at wherever Marcus Johnson is, I think he's got a real chance to be getting snaps for this offense and making plays. You look at his history, Caroline, and he really was explosive for the Colts the last couple of years when he was available. Averaged 17.2 per catch, more than 500 yards receiving, and he had a series of injuries. And they finally let him go with his latest quad injury, and the Titans have picked him up. And that's really, to me, the question is, can he hold up? He's had a lot of different kinds of injuries in his career that I think have held back a really talented guy. Like you said, I mean, I agree with you. You watch him out there, like that's a legit guy. That's a fast NFL receiver, a guy who ran a sub 4.4 coming out of Texas. 6 years, so he's in his prime. I mean, there's a lot to like. I think if he can avoid the injury thing, I think it's going to end up being a really good find for John Robbins.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, you were out at Titans practice yesterday at Nissan Stadium. I saw a few of your tweets about Elijah Molden, some of the Titans offensive line work. What were some of your major takeaways from the Titans open practice yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being a good practice for the fans. It was a good crowd, like 7,000 people, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. Yeah, and early on they were doing walkthrough stuff, and I was like, oh man, I hope Vrabel is going to give these people something to watch. But he did eventually, and like I said, I think Josh Reynolds is probably one of the stories of the day. He did have a drop early, but then made some big plays. Chester Rogers with some big plays. I mean, Tannehill threw it really well, although he had two batted at the line by Larrell Murchison, one of which was picked off by Kevin Byard. So, the defense got in some shots there as well. The fans got to see Derrick Henry at least carry the ball, not full speed, but carry the ball. And you're even seeing other guys get more reps now. Taylor Lewan is out there in pass pro against, other players. Bud Dupree is out there in team a little bit. A.J. Brown was back out there in team. So still not quite there with Caleb Farley, but, the overall health, except for guys who got hurt, is good. Of course, Tucker McCann was missing after having such a great Friday night, and Sam Ficken was the one kicker, and they put him in pressure situations, and I think it was 8 for 9, missed like a 44, 48-yard or something like that. So he was wide right, push one, and it seems like that's his thing. If he's going to miss, he's going to push it. But he is also kicking well, so that's a big question for me this week is Tucker McCann, is this going to be a longer-term thing? Because it looks like maybe he was starting to come to his own. And if so, do they like Sam Ficken enough? But it's probably going to be Ficken's whole game Saturday night.
And Tucker McCann, another person who most likely will not be traveling to Tampa Bay, dealing with a little bit of a leg injury there. Did you see anything from Tucker McCann that would make you deter you from thinking that Tucker McCann could be healthy enough for Week 1?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to say, And I mean, if that's the case, obviously it's move on from him this year, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can put him on IR, and of course last year he had injuries too, and he wasn't ready. But they obviously have invested in him, and they've kind of thought this could be, the young kicker that all of a sudden becomes your 10-year kicker. And I had not really bought that, but lately he has looked like that, and he looked great in Atlanta with the pressure, with the game situation. The lights are on, and he stepped up. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. If he's hurt even beyond this week, how do they handle that? They've got a decent guy in Ficken, but I keep drifting back towards Stephen Gostkowski as the ultimate answer.
Joe Rexrode, one last question for you. Bruce Arians has already come out and said that he will not play the starters in the Titans preseason game. Do you think that the Titans will put out the AJs, the Ryan Tannehills, the Derrick Henrys, their starters in the preseason game against the Bucs?
I mean, I'm going to guess not, and Vrabel has already he's kind of established himself as a coach who does not like to have his key guys play much in the preseason anyway. I mean, I was very disappointed to hear that from Bruce Arians because I'm going down for the game Friday, and I'm like, well, I don't get to see some Brady.
I want to see.
I don't get to see some Gronk, Come on, man. But, I guess Vrabel could go out there, put his starters and, guarantee a win, get a big preseason victory. But, yeah, I'm guessing it's going to be heavy backups. What will be interesting, Carolina, is if that's how it goes, because Arians is doing that with the idea of using his starters to some extent in the last one to kind of do that dress rehearsal thing. Does Vrabel look at it that way as well and have more guys, playing in the one home game August 28th against the Bears? We will see. Fans would certainly like that, who are paying money for tickets and would like to see some of the players whose names they know.
Exactly, because I kind of assumed that this year they would play game 2 traditionally like game 3, put your starters out for maybe a series or two, maybe a quarter, use that as their dress rehearsal, and then kind of put out the lower end guys for game 3. But it sounds like Bruce Arians will be flip-flopping that. But Joe,
and the timing makes sense to do it like the way Arians is doing it because you have so much time between that and the opener. So maybe Vrabel will follow the same plan. I mean, the guy did just win a Super Bowl, so maybe you should copy him like Vrabel.
Yeah, maybe that's not a bad person to follow in their footsteps. Joe Rexrode, we appreciate you. Joe Rexrode heading out to Tampa Bay. Jared Stillman heading out there today as well. We will have all of your Titans, Bucs practice coverage here on 102.5 The Game. We appreciate you, Joe. Coming up next, we'll do Carolines before Jared Stillman hits the road for Tampa. You are listening to Stillman and Company on 102.5 The Game. Yeah, I figured
still can win a game. Like, we've seen, like, the Arizona Cardinals have a worthless team and go out there and still win a game in December that keeps somebody out of the playoffs. In baseball, and maybe it's because the Cubs absolutely gutted their roster, but it feels to me like there's a lot of, it's August 17th. We got a month and a half of this crap left to go. We freaking stink. Because that's what I feel like from the Cubs. They're awful. But not only are they awful, it's like they don't even care anymore. And
well,
I
they
hate
sold
that.
off all of their good players. They have no one left.
I know, but they don't even put up a fight. I mean, they don't even put up a fight. And this is baseball. This is not, I would think that, like, in football, like, once you know you're not any good, like, you're donezo because you know you're not any good.
And then you can work for that first-round draft pick.
But this is, but the players don't care about that. But this is baseball. Like, baseball. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, give me the Reds.
We've also got the Marlins and the Braves. Your guys tonight
Braves.
took the Braves last night.
Screwed up yesterday.
Give me the Marlins on the money line, plus 110. So the Braves rolled them 12-2 last night, as we know. Braves are throwing out Huascar Ynoa on the mound. So through 9 games, 8 starts this season, he's 4-2 with a 3.02 ERA. But he's coming off IL with a fractured hand. So this will be his first start. His first start after coming back from IL. He hasn't pitched since May 16th. The Marlins are throwing out Sandy Alcantara out on the mound. 7-10 with a 3.52 ERA. I do think the Braves are probably the better team, but there are just so many question marks surrounding the Braves starting pitcher tonight coming off of IR. So, the Marlins going to flip-flop a little bit from last night.
So, Huascar Ynoa is a bad boy, but he's also apparently stupid because he punched the wall, and that's why he broke his hand. And
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Like I said, he's kind of a bad boy. And the Marlins stink. Now, Alcantara is not a bad pitcher, but the Marlins stink. So I'm going to take the Braves here. I'm going to take the Braves on the money line. Give them to me. Give me Huascar Ynoa. I think he gets the job. You know what's crazy is, like, I was just looking at the standings. The Mets spent all this money this year. And then they, got off to a big start. And it was funny because, TD's a huge Mets fan.
He's a huge Mets fan.
And so when the Mets traded for, Francisco Lindor, TD was like, hey, the Mets. And, Braden Gall loves the Mets, and he was like, the Mets. And was Willie like that? I'm sure he probably wasn't, because I'm sure he's a little bit more measured, having, Nah, he probably was.
He probably was.
And so, all these Mets fans were just like, oh, the Mets. And I'm looking at it right now, and the Mets are 3.5 back. Well, what about the Mets? Braves aren't even good. I'm a Braves fan.
The Braves have been
good
as of, they've turned it around, I would say, in the past month or so.
Well, they've won 17 of 18 or something ridiculous.
Yeah, something ridiculous like that. So, on the season, are the Braves good? But the past month.
Well, they're playing the Marlins tonight. I was in Miami when Ronald Acuna got hurt. I saw it, right in front of me. I literally saw this man, and I love Ronald Acuna. I see him weeping in front of me. Because he knows he either broke his leg. I thought he broke his leg.
Oh, my gosh.
But they got the card out there. And at that point, I'm like, see ya. But the Mets, 3-0. What about the Mets? What's next?
We've also got the Brewers and the Cardinals, and I kind of feel like I'm applying that same kind of logic that you were talking about earlier with your own team. If I pick against my team and they win, then I'm happy.
Hedge.
Exactly. But if I pick them and they lose, then I lose money.
But your team's 10 back, so I'm not sure you really have much to care about that.
Yeah, but there's still a glimmer of hope for me. But I'm still going to take the Brewers on the money line, minus 150. Corbin Burns is out on the mound for the Brewers. He is lighting it up. He's got a 2.23 ERA on the season. He's one of the National League Central Cy Young favorites. Cardinals are throwing out Waino, who I love dearly, but he's got a 2.79 ERA at Busch Stadium. That can give the Cardinals a little bit of hope. He's got a 3.28 ERA on the season, which for a 39-year-old is pretty impressive. But he's pitching lights out. Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt are slugging as of late, but I'm not going to pick against Corbin Burns, who has been fantastic this season. So give me the Brewers on the money line.
Okay, I am going to take the Brewers as well. You're picking some bad teams versus good teams here, and so I got to pick the Brewers.
You always get on me for that, but what is wrong with picking the good teams?
Well, I just, it's just kind of we're going to pick the same teams. It's who's going to win in football? We've got the Kansas City Chiefs, and we've got the New York Jets. And it's like, well, you
Well,
picked the
obviously you're
Jets.
gonna pick the
You picked the
Chiefs.
Chiefs, so now I got to pick the Chiefs, but it's like not fun when we pick the same thing. So I'm going to take the Brewers
I'm just
here, I
giving the
guess.
people the best advice I can give.
Well, I'm going to give the people
Trying
some
to
good advice right here.
Okay.
Facebook, 9 o'clock Central tonight. You know where I'm going with this?
I think I might.
Where?
Is that when you will be in Tampa? Are you going live on Facebook tonight?
No, we're picking a game right here. Trying to help the people out.
Oh, okay.
Facebook, 9 o'clock tonight. The Indiana Fever in the WNBA taking on the Phoenix Mercury. And I'm telling you, just trust me on this. Phoenix Mercury tonight. I'm going to take them on the money line. They're 9.5-point favorites. I'm going to take the Phoenix Mercury. They got Brittany Griner averaging 20 points a game.
Diana Taurasi.
They've got Skylar Diggins, you know, and not that the other team doesn't have good players, because Kelsey Mitchell was a good player. We recruited her when I was in college. Danielle Robinson was a good player. We played against her in the Final Four at Oklahoma when I was in college. But I am taking the Phoenix Mercury to just annihilate the Indiana Fever tonight. Again, give me the Mercury on the money line.
Give me the Mercury minus 9.5.
Wow, you feel very confident.
I do feel confident about that. That is a team full of some ballers. So take me
But they're
minus
only 10-10
9.5.
on the season.
Still, give me minus 9.5.
They're 10-10 on the WNBA season.
But I still feel very vehemently that I deserve more points. If I win against the spread, I deserve more points than you on the money line. But that's a hill. That's a hill that I'm willing to die on.
No.
The hill I will be willing to die on.
By the way, it should be noted the Indiana Fever are 4-17. They're 1-9 on the road, and they're playing at Phoenix. So again, that game's on Facebook. I'm telling you, like, if you're listening to this because you want to like watch games that are interesting to you, and the WNBA probably doesn't interest you, well, that's your prerogative. But if you're trying to make money right now, you got 2 games in the WNBA. You got this one tonight. Phoenix is 10-10. They're at home. They have better players. Indiana 4-17. They're 1-9 away. That's on Facebook. CBS Sports Network. You've got the Las Vegas Aces 16-5 at home 9 o'clock against the Washington Mystics. And I like the Mystics because Maisha Hines-Allen, I think, is on the Mystics, and that's my girl. But they're not very good. They're 8-11, 3-7 on the road. So I had to load up a bunch of money. Again, Vegas 9.5-point favorites too in that game. But I think the WNBA, you can make it's way easier to bet the WNBA than it is the NBA.
Oh, I would agree. And that's why I bet on KBO as well. Korean baseball.
So
much easier to bet on than actual baseball. Yeah. Because you have your really, really good teams, your Doossons of the world, and then you have your teams that just aren't very good.
So Caroline Fenton has told everybody that I'm not a college football fan. That's not true. College football just does many a thing that make it harder to be a college football fan by the day. I feel like they do things. Sometimes it's out of their control, but most of the time it's not. But I'm on my way to Tampa. Titans and Bucks practicing tomorrow. Trevor Maddich is in studio with Caroline. By the way, I heard today that Feinbaum and Greeny talking about whether or not Nick Saban would win 8.5 championships. I'm going to go ahead and take the over on that one. But Trevor's Index, Stillman and Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. See you tomorrow at 2 from Tampa. Trevor for the next hour with Caroline. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game.
The tag out at second base.
Nashville Sounds Baseball, the home of Hit City. Every hit.
Swung on, driven in the air. Gone!
Strikeout.
Strike 3 called.
And home run of Sounds Baseball.
That ball is gone.
Can be heard all season long.
Sounds win.
On Nashville's home for ESPN Radio.
ESPN
94.9 and the Game Nashville app.
ElectronicExpress.com. We make it happen.
When you purchase a certified pre-owned vehicle from Mercedes-Benz of Music City, you have the power of the star backing your car. To meet certification standards, a car has to be less than 6 years old with less than 75,000 miles. All certified vehicles come with 24/7 personal assistance and an extra 12-month unlimited mileage warranty. Right now, you can get 1.99% financing for 36 months on select 2017.
Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. We are live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Jared Stillman is on his way to Tampa Bay, so make sure to follow along his Twitter at Jared Stillman. We'll have all sorts of updates from the Titans practices in Tampa Bay against the Bucks. But we are joined live now in studio by Trevor Matich, ESPN college football analyst. We appreciate Trev for joining us today.
It is great to be here with you, Caroline. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here, Trev. So first and foremost, I want to get right into it. The AP preseason top 25 poll was just released yesterday. And there were a few things that really stuck out to me, Trev. I think first and foremost, we have Iowa State in the top 10. Now, I know this is this is a team that you have been very high on for the past few weeks. So what about Iowa State exactly do you think they have earned a spot in the top 10? They're at number 7 right now in the AP preseason poll.
Caroline, pretty much everybody is back, especially their quarterback, Brock Purdy. Mm-hmm. And this is a real advantage in this top 10. There's a lot of quarterbacks, especially those above Iowa State, that are new to their teams. If you look at 1 through 7, you're looking at Oklahoma is the only team that returns a full season starting quarterback. And then you've got Iowa State at number 7. Brock Purdy is back. Now, the thing about this team that people, I think, misunderstand is that they think that it's, out in the cornfield somewhere and they don't have any talent and they can't recruit anybody above a 3-star, but then they develop them and they become pretty decent football players as a team. Well, that's not the way it is. I mean, those things are true about Iowa State, but they send a lot of guys to the NFL, including guys in the first round to the NFL. And this team is similar to that. So not only do they have that base of good talent, they've got superstars led by their quarterback coming back.
And, okay, so you mentioned that Iowa State has a returning quarterback, that they're 7 below 5 other teams, not excluding Oklahoma, who will bring Spencer Rattler back as their starting quarterback. But it's amazing how there are 5 teams in the top 6 who have new quarterbacks. I guess you could call Uiagalelei a new quarterback. He stepped in for a few games when Trevor Lawrence was in COVID protocol, but still a new starting quarterback. So we're seeing this huge turnover from quarterbacks from last year, now in the NFL, now moving on to new things with starting quarterbacks. What is it about Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State that can just recycle quarterbacks and still be in the top 3, top 5, top 10?
There are 2 things about that. And I have to laugh a little bit because truth repeated over time becomes cliche, right?
Right.
And so Alabama, they don't rebuild, they reload. Well, how do they do that? Because they're so strong at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Their defense is stout. And at the line of scrimmage, their front 7 will be one of the better front 7s in all of college football. In Will Anderson, he is going to be maybe one of the breakout stars on defense nationally. I mean, in talking to the people at Alabama, he's an outside linebacker, they said that Anderson is a guy that they haven't had anybody quite like him going back as far as anybody can remember. Certainly under Saban. That's how amazing he is. And that's just one of the guys on this defense. That helps a new quarterback, because they rarely find themselves in a position to have to desperately come back because they're trailing by a lot, right? And that's what you don't want as a new quarterback. Certainly his coach doesn't want. It's for him to be dropping back in the second half, trailing by a lot on the scoreboard, and having to wait in the pocket, scramble around, make big plays down the field because it's the only chance they have to overcome the deficit on the scoreboard. Well, Bama rarely puts a young quarterback in that position. The other one is a similar benefit that the Titans have. They always have big, powerful offensive line, big, powerful running backs, and that not only slows down the pass rush, but it also creates that great play-action pass down the field. So if you're a young quarterback, there's less on your shoulders to have to be good at right now in order for the team to have a chance to win.
So you mentioned Brock Purdy, Iowa State, number 7 in the AP preseason top 25 poll. Brock Purdy, Iowa State quarterback. However, ESPN came out with an article with the most likely Heisman contenders for each top 25 team. Breece Hall, Iowa State's running back, was listed as the most likely Heisman contender. I mean, with that duo alone, if Brock Purdy is going to be their biggest threat, the biggest reason why having him come back and be a top 10 team, then Breece Hall could be a force to be reckoned with. ESPN compares him to Najee Harris. What do you see in Breece Hall that makes him potentially a Heisman contender over their quarterback?
Najee Harris, Alabama's running back last year, drafted in the first round this year. And the thing about Breece Hall is that he can do everything that Harris can do. He could have come out and been a first-round caliber running back in the NFL draft last year. So he does all the same things for Brock Purdy that Najee Harris did for Mac Jones last year. He's got an experienced offensive line coming back. And so all these things make Iowa State really hard to stop. They've got good receivers on the outside. They've got to replace a couple of guys that went off to the league. But they've got good talent and good depth. But when you start with that great running back, the defense can't focus on what I think fans look at as the biggest threat, which is the quarterback, Brock Purdy, because if they're focused on Purdy, then Hall is going to gouge them. And so this is one of the reasons that Iowa State out in the cornfield, right, could end up busting the playoff this year. Now, people are talking about Oklahoma, and rightfully so. This is the best, most complete team that Oklahoma has had in recent memory, which is to say offense as good as advertised, defense is really good this year. In the past, the offense has been great. The defense has been abysmal, right? And we always thought that if Oklahoma's defense could improve from heinous to merely awful, then that would give them a chance at the playoff level. But they weren't. The defense stayed heinous. Well, now they've improved past abysmal and awful up into pretty good. And so Oklahoma rightfully is being talked about as a top 4 team and a playoff contender. But Iowa State is right there with them. And if they can get past Oklahoma in conference, then Iowa State may be that Cinderella that breaks into the top 4, and everybody nationally are going to wonder what in the world just happened.
Because it does seem like, you're so used to those Alabamas, Clemson's, Ohio State's, Oklahoma's in the top 4. Right? You get sick of it. But sometimes you get thrown an Oregon, an LSU, a Georgia. Of all of the teams in college football, do you think Iowa State could be that one?
Iowa State could be. And partly it's because of schedule. I mean, people ask all the time, do you think that Alabama or Clemson is most likely to get back to the playoff? And you always say Clemson, because their schedule is the ACC. Alabama's got to get through the SEC.
Exactly.
Right? And so plus Miami this year, so there's an ACC flavor thrown into Alabama's schedule. But when you look at Iowa State, no disrespect to the Big 12. The Big 12 is a hard league to go undefeated in because there's so many different styles, much like the Pac-12. So many different styles, so many teams that are quite good, even though they've only had one team that's been national level power, and that's been Oklahoma. Pac-12 has been a difficult team, a league to win for the same reasons, except they have not had in most years that 1 or 2 national level power. But it makes it difficult to go undefeated through a league like that. But in this year's Big 12, if they can knock off Oklahoma, then Iowa State has a chance to do that. But I'll tell you what, they wouldn't be the craziest one. And they wouldn't be the one farthest outside of what fans might expect as a dark horse to make the playoff, because they've been so good for the last couple of years. Everybody's talking about them as a dark horse, and that doesn't really make them a dark horse at all, does it?
That's very fair.
Yeah.
That's very fair.
I'll give you 2 teams, okay?
Okay.
And you tell me if I'm crazy. Actually, I am crazy, but this might not be the reason why. So one of them is Oregon. You mentioned Oregon, right, Caroline?
Yeah.
Thing about Oregon this year is that they are really complete. On the defensive side of the ball, they've got dudes everywhere, led by Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau was the #1 recruit in the nation a few years ago out of Southern California, defensive end, and he is as unblockable as anybody I've ever seen on any level. I'm talking Kayvon Thibodeau of Oregon is as unblockable as Aaron Donald of the Rams is.
Whoa.
As J.J. Watt, when, in his prime with Houston, right? As the best pass rushers in the NFL, you consider, okay, 2 guys might not be enough. That's the way Thibodeau is. It is hilarious to watch this guy abuse blockers. I mean, you'll see teams decide to run right at him because he's so athletic. So I'll have my big 310-pound left tackle just smash him in the face, and it doesn't matter if he's athletic. It only matters how physical and tough he is. I've seen him take those kinds of plays at the point of attack, literally throw the left tackle into where the center's supposed to be, and then make the tackle right there in the hole. But I've seen him go around guys like Elijah Vera Tucker, last year USC's left tackle, who became the first-round pick of the New York Jets this year, the 14th pick in the draft, USC Trojan Elijah Vera Tucker, and Kayvon Thibodeau abused him as if he weren't even there. I mean, he just went around him. He went over him. He ran over him. He went inside. Anywhere he wanted to go, and this is a first-round draft choice. Now, that kind of disruption on a defense that has other dudes all over the place. Put you in position to win pretty much every game you play. But on offense, they're also very balanced. So watch out for Oregon to be one of those teams. Is that crazy?
I don't think that's the craziest thing I've heard. I don't think it's the craziest thing I've heard. And I would say out of the Pac-12, I know that people are very high on Arizona State, possibly USC, Keaton Slovis, but I would say Oregon is usually consistently that powerhouse team out of the Pac-12.
Yeah, USC, they're just struggling. I mean, Pac-12 needs USC to be good because they are, truly the national brand. Arizona State, for those who don't know, Google it because it's really kind of a fascinating drama going on down there. They have been accused by the NCAA. They're being investigated for recruiting violations during the COVID year last year. That's already got a couple of coaches that have lost their position. They've stepped away. And half that coaching staff might end up getting fired. The head coach is under investigation. I love him. It's Herm Edwards. And I don't know what happened and what didn't. But right now there is so much smoke down there, you can't even see if there's a fire. So that, for people that are interested in Arizona State, look at that. The other team that I think is a dark horse that could make it, people know this team will be good. But I don't know that they believe they can get to the top 4. I do. And that's Cincinnati. Last year, we saw Cincinnati undefeated into the Peach Bowl against Georgia. They took Georgia to the final minute, and with just a few seconds to go, Cincinnati was ahead of the Bulldogs by 2 points when Georgia kicked a 53-yard field goal that ended up being the game winner. So undefeated all the way up to the last couple of seconds, and then an unlikely low percentage field goal by Georgia is what knocked them off. Cincinnati has almost everybody back, too. They need to replace a couple of folks, but especially their quarterback, Desmond Ridder. Last year, it took him till about halfway through the season to really find his stride. This year, Desmond Ridder, I think, will be a Heisman Trophy candidate. Now, they got to win at Indiana and at Notre Dame. That's a tall order. But they've got the defense that can keep any game low scoring. And if Ridder plays like I expect him to, Cincinnati could go through this whole season undefeated with wins at Indiana and Notre Dame. And that would put them in range of that top 4. Watch out for the Bearcats.
So you mentioned Cincinnati. You also mentioned Indiana. I want to get into that and a few more Group of 5 schools that have made their way into the top 25. What Trevor thinks about that. Can they survive in 2021 after a stellar 2020 year? We will get into all of that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you have a question for Trevor, if your team is or isn't in the top 25 and you want to know why, Trevor has the answer. We will get into all of that next. You are listening to Stillman and Company live on 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company. We are joined by Trevor Maddich, ESPN college football analyst, live in studio. Trevor Maddich brought to you by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor and I are breaking down the AP preseason poll top 25. We looked at Iowa State, who Trevor thinks could possibly be a dark horse, even though that name is thrown around a lot with Iowa State, that they could be a dark horse for the top 4 in the college football playoff. Oregon and Cincinnati, 2 other possible dark horses for the college football playoff this year. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We're taking your calls, your texts, any of your questions that you may have for Trevor. And we want to get into a little bit more of the AP preseason top 25. But before we do that, we will go to your phones. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Bob is up next.
Hey, Trevor, good to talk to you guys. I'm a Nebraska fan, have been for years. In Tom Osborne's last 63 games, he went 60-3 and won 3 national championships. Those days are over. I'm not sure if Nebraska could beat Vanderbilt if they play tomorrow. However, they open with Illinois, and then they play Fordham, and then they play Buffalo. So they have a chance to go 3-0. And then from that point on, they've got Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, all the tough teams in the Big Ten. I think the program is dead. Can you convince me that it's not, and that maybe they can get back and be a winner again?
Well, sometimes a deep slumber looks like dead. And so maybe they're just way asleep still. I think that they don't have the advantages that Scott Frost, their head coach, had when he turned around UCF so fast, which was his stop before he came to Nebraska. You know, they were 1-12, and then a couple of years later, they were 12-0, UCF. And so everybody at Nebraska thought that Scott Frost, being a Nebraska guy, would come back into the Cornhuskers, and they'd turn around just so fast. The problem is that within literally a 3-wood of campus at UCF in Orlando, you've got enough great, fast players to build a team that can run with anybody. And, you know, within a 3-wood of campus in Lincoln, Nebraska, not as many guys. You've got to go farther out. And really what he needs to do is continue to mine his relationships in Florida to get some people out of that state that weren't going to Miami or Florida State or Alabama. Get them to come up to Nebraska. It's a little chilly up there, but, you know, get them to come up so he can continue to add some of that speed that he was used to at UCF. But this year, I think the best hope for Nebraska fans is experience. I mean, they've got 5 super seniors back on defense, so they will be better on defense because of that experience. And part of the reason those guys came back is because they're mad. They don't want to leave their part of the legacy of the universe of Nebraska football being seen as one of those inept groups. So there's real focus there. And then on offense, they've got a big offensive line, guys that have played a lot of football last year. Really, it's going to come down to Adrian Martinez at quarterback. I mean, last year, that position was about half of their rushing yards. And so Martinez is probably going to have to run well again. But if he can cut down on his mistakes in the passing game and be more consistent, you could see a quick turnaround from Nebraska from being just really unfortunate to being a team that is hard to beat by most teams. And so I think watch Adrian Martinez and watch that big offensive line, because that's where your hope will come.
You mentioned Scott Frost at UCF being able to bring that program immense amount of success. Even got their own national championship, maybe not the actual one,
but it is one. That's the thing. They had Danny White, who is now the athletic director at Tennessee, was the athletic director there at UCF. Mm-hmm. And that year when they went undefeated and they smoked Auburn in the Sugar Bowl, or whichever bowl it was, I can't remember. They didn't finish number 1 in the AP and all that other stuff, obviously not in the college football playoff rankings because they weren't in the college football playoff. But there was an organization that is accredited as a national championship certified organization that named them the number 1 team in the country. And so I checked into that and found that their claim to being national champion, or at least co-champion, is legitimate.
I don't buy it.
Oh,
I don't buy it.
You've got to decertify that group before.
I know, and I don't have the power to do so.
You have more power than you think, Caroline.
You know what? Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say. But about group of 5 schools, you mentioned Cincinnati could possibly be a dark horse to get into the college football playoff. And now, of course, that makes us think about UCF. They went undefeated. They weren't able to make the college football playoff. And they always mention strength of schedule. The UCF just doesn't play the same teams that Alabama plays, that Oklahoma plays. Cincinnati does play Notre Dame. But is that enough for them to get into the college football playoff?
I think this time it is, because Notre Dame is a team that people expect. I mean, they're preseason top 10, and a team that people expect to possibly get into that number 4 spot. And then before Notre Dame, they go to Indiana. And Indiana is a team that people think is the best competition or the biggest worry, let's put it that way, for Ohio State to just sweep through the Big Ten. Because Penn State started last year, I think it was 0-5, and then they won their last 4 in a row. So I think Penn State, their turnaround is going to be pretty quick. Michigan is not ready yet, right? Wisconsin has a lot of questions. Iowa's got a lot of questions. The real question for Big Ten fans is, can anybody challenge Ohio State? And if anybody can, who is it? Last year, remember that Indiana went up to Columbus and took Ohio State to within, I think, a touchdown. I mean, the Buckeyes got way ahead of them, and then they relaxed for just a minute, and Indiana wasn't done yet. And they came roaring back. And they have a lot of those same guys back, especially in the passing game. And so when you look at the teams that Group of 5 have to play, you talk about Cincinnati with Indiana and Notre Dame. You have to have that kind of schedule in order to get into the playoff. Remember that last year Cincinnati was undefeated and wasn't anywhere near that 4 spot, right? This year with this schedule, they have a chance. But the rest of them, if their goal is to get into the top 4, then they've got to schedule that way, or undefeated still won't get it done. But that's one of the reasons that I think the 12-team proposal, 12-team playoff, which right now is just a proposal, is so good. Because it gives those teams farther down the list of strength of schedule hope anyway to get in. Because think of it this way. Last year, Alabama won the national championship, right? They won the playoff. So, Caroline, if you took Alabama, that same team that won it all last year, and lifted them out of the SEC and put them in the Sun Belt Conference and played a Sun Belt schedule and dominated it, would they have made the playoff?
That's a good question.
See, I don't think they would.
I don't think they would, because would any other Sun Belt team get in?
Cincinnati was dominant a lot of that time last year.
And the AAC is a much tougher conference than the Sun Belt.
UCF was getting 600, 700 yards a game in that season when they went 13-0 and beat Auburn in the bowl game. They didn't make the playoff.
It's not as attractive when you're doing it against Memphis or UCF or Coastal Carolina. No offense to those programs. It's much more impressive when you're doing it against LSU and Texas A&M.
But that Alabama team, if you lifted them out of the SEC last year and put them in the Sun Belt, no disrespect to the Sun Belt, but we're talking about strength of schedule now, would still have been good enough to win the national championship, and probably would not have been put in the playoff, because the committee would probably have said, yeah, they dominated everybody they play, but who do they play? Really? Right? And so this is where teams like Cincinnati need to schedule up.
And there are 2 more teams in the top 25, Group of 5 schools, Coastal Carolina at 22 and University of Louisiana at Lafayette at 23. Now, those are 2 programs that saw a lot of success last year. We saw that Coastal Carolina Liberty game. That was a shootout. That was a blast. Can they maintain this top 25 status? Because I feel like 2020 felt like the year of the Group of 5. We saw Cincinnati. We saw Coastal Carolina, ULL, Liberty. We saw these teams put up big numbers, have big-time wins. BYU, another one, your alma mater. Can they do it again? Or was 2020 just their 15 minutes of fame?
No, they can. They can absolutely come back. Their quarterback last year, Grayson McCall, people forget he was a freshman.
Right.
Because he played like he's been around for 20 years. I mean, he was phenomenal. And their scheme on offense makes them really hard to prepare for, extraordinarily hard to prepare for, which was one of the reasons that BYU, my school, going out to play them on literally a few days' notice, that was a big concern.
Yeah.
Because what they do is have a combination of pro style, traditional zone read college style, and then old school triple option college as well. And when you put all those things together, they execute each of those 3 styles equally well, which is really weird. Normally you focus on one thing, you excel at that. Coastal Carolina was good at all of them. So the defense doesn't have enough time to practice against zone read option, and old school triple option, and pro style, and get equally good at defending all 3 of them in a week, right? And so Coastal Carolina has a big advantage there. You mentioned Louisiana. Louisiana is really, really interesting to me, because they have an opportunity in the opener to make a national splash and move up in the rankings and get on the radar of these pollsters. They open up against Texas, at Texas. Texas right now is thinking about their future SEC, right? Schedule. They're
Steve
thinking about
Sarkisian in his first year as head coach.
Alabama, former offensive coordinator. And they're also thinking about what's the Big 12, what's going to be like, because they're going to take a lot of shots, I think, that they ordinarily wouldn't take. That's even worse. I mean, if Texas is hated by the other members of the Big 12, and
they were before all of this mess.
If it's possible to get even more hated, my goodness, right?
I think they're also hated in the SEC too.
Yeah, well, they're hated by Louisiana.
Oh, yes, they are.
And Louisiana,
I can vouch for that.
What was it, last year or the year before? Louisiana went up to Iowa State and beat them in the opener and knocked their playoff hopes out of the water. But at the first game of the season, they have a chance to make that big splash against Texas because everybody's watching Texas, and this Louisiana team is really good.
And Billy Napier is a coach that I'm very high on, and it would be a coach that I wouldn't be surprised make his way to a Power 5 team soon enough.
Yep, and he had options this last year, but he chose to come back and coach quarterback Levi Lewis.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. We're taking your calls, your texts, any of your college football questions for Trevor Matich, who joins us in studio. Trevor Matich brought to you by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Coming up next, we'll get into a little bit of buy or sell with some SEC storylines with Trevor. So make sure that you tune in for that. You're listening to Stillman and Company on 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company is brought to you by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. Caroline Fenton joined by Trevor Maddich here live in studio. Trevor Maddich brought to you by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Jared Stillman is on the road to Tampa Bay, so we will have all of your Titans-Bucks practice and preseason coverage coming up the next few days. But first and foremost, Trev, I want to talk a little bit of SEC with you. We'll do a game of buy or sell with the SEC coming up. But first, I have a question for you. There was a piece in The Athletic that talked about some of the biggest storylines surrounding college football, and it struck a chord with me with programs like Tennessee. With Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, it seems like programs like Tennessee, like South Carolina, like Mississippi State, programs that maybe haven't had immense amounts of success recently. It seems like with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC that they have this very small window before they join the SEC to make a splash in terms of recruiting, in terms of national presence, because it feels to me once Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC, the big get bigger and the small only get smaller.
That, I think, is a fair assessment, Caroline. I think it's a fair assessment. And I think fans of those schools that were so excited when they hired two dynamic coaches, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss and Mike Leach at Mississippi State, thought, okay, now we're on the way. And this throws a real wrench into what they're trying to get done, because you talked about recruiting. Texas and Oklahoma recruit heavily in Texas. And when A&M joined the SEC, it took away the biggest selling point that schools like Ole Miss and Mississippi State had to sell to Texas recruits, which is, yeah, you can go play there, but you're playing in the Big 12. You want to play with the best, come over here and play with us, right? And so maybe that was the only team that that recruited them from the SEC. They said, yeah, I want to play in the SEC. I want to play against Alabama every year. I'll go to Mississippi State or Ole Miss. Yeah, I want to play. Then all of a sudden, Texas A&M shows up in the SEC, and some of those guys that would have gone to SEC schools are now going to new SEC school then, Texas A&M. Now Texas and Oklahoma are going to siphon off even more. So it doesn't close down Texas recruiting to some of those other SEC schools, but it greatly complicates it further for them to pull some of the top talent out of there. And when you look at some of those places, I mean, Alabama, for example, has really good high school football, but if they could only recruit in Alabama, Alabama wouldn't be Alabama, University of Alabama, right? They've got to go elsewhere. Same way in the state of Mississippi, same way in the state of Missouri. State of South Carolina. Very good high school football players, but they need more from other places. One of those places is usually Texas, and there will be slimmer pickings there now.
So do you think, in your opinion, is Josh Heupel the guy? Is Joe Milton the quarterback to be able for Tennessee to capitalize on this small window before Texas and Oklahoma come in to be able to make a splash with recruits?
Tennessee, I think, has a chance because when you say splash, I mean, it could be a ginormous, colorful splash of rainbow-colored paint all flying through the air, right? Because of the offense that Josh Heupel can bring to bear.
Right.
Remember that before he was at UCF, he was the offensive coordinator at Missouri for a couple of years. And with a quarterback and a good stable of receivers, he lit up the SEC, lit up SEC defenses. Now, Missouri's defense wasn't enough to turn that into much more than that, although they did go to the SEC championship game. I think the first 2 years they were in the conference, right? So the thing about Heupel and his experience in the SEC is that he's shown that he can make that splash. Now, recruits, what do they want? They want to go to the NFL. But now what they want before the NFL is name, image, and likeness.
They want to make money.
Big bucks. And they see reports that Alabama's quarterback, Bryce Young, has signed almost $1 million worth of NIL deals and hasn't even started a game yet for the Tide. And people look at that and say, whoa, where can I go to make a huge splash and be one of the national leaders and get breakdowns done on me on SportsCenter so people can say how great I am and all this stuff? Where can I go to do that, right? Well, they can't all go to Alabama. They can't all go to Georgia. And so Tennessee is in that mix to go for the next tier. And those quarterbacks and receivers that want to make a huge splash early have a great opportunity here. That's their selling point. But you're right, because Oklahoma, same way. Texas, with Steve Sarkisian, the former Alabama offensive coordinator, they're going to grow into that as well. So now's the time for Heupel in Tennessee to get enough top recruits in that they can make that splash and have their success continue to power it.
especially Steve Sarkisian, if he does make the trek to 2025, 2026, whenever Texas does enter the SEC, if Sarkisian's still there, he has those recruiting pipelines in Alabama, in Mississippi, most likely the same ones that he's maintained at his time at Alabama.
Georgia, Florida, et cetera.
Georgia, Florida,
right,
exactly.
All those things. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons they hired him at Texas, because, Texas is enough to be a national championship caliber team if Texas could get the best of Texas. Texas doesn't get the best of Texas. The best of Texas goes to a lot of places, including to Austin. So that helps him.
We'll go to your phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you have questions for Trevor Maddich, ESPN college football analyst. But first and foremost, Brian texts into our text line and says, what is your true projection for Georgia this year?
I think Georgia has a chance to win it all this year.
Really?
Georgia has felt like they've had a national championship roster for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They've just been missing one thing, and that is a quarterback who can throw the ball down the field. They've had guys that were accurate, but didn't have great strong arms like Jake Fromm, right? Who still went to the NFL. They've had guys with big strong arms, but that weren't consistent enough with their accuracy. And JT Daniels now, the USC transfer, Georgia talks about him as being the first guy in a long time that combines both the accuracy and the arm strength and the leadership and puts it all into one package. And you saw last year, he missed the first 6 games because of rehabbing a knee injury. Started the last 4 games, and their offensive production went up by 100 yards per game in the games that he started. And keep in mind that he still didn't have the chemistry with his receivers that he will have this coming year, because he wasn't taking the first team reps in practice, and he wasn't able to get thousands and thousands and thousands of reps. Now, with a full offseason where they had spring ball, they had, the ability to go out and throw. COVID didn't stop them from doing that. Assuming a full summer camp here, all of a sudden he's going to have that kind of chemistry down the field. You add that to a defense that will still be one of the best in the country, and a running game that still will be extremely stout and a force to be reckoned with. Now you have that deep passing game going, and Georgia has a chance to win it all. Now, the receivers need to step up, because George Pickens, their top receiver, suffered an ACL knee injury and probably won't be back until late in the season if he's back at all. But they've got other guys that are fast. A.D. Mitchell is one guy to watch. He's a true freshman that really lit up the spring game, that has shown a lot of chemistry with JT Daniels in their offseason workouts. And if he can take that into this season as a true freshman, then that will answer one of the questions: where will some of the dynamism at receiver come from? But that's the only question mark that I can see that could hold back Georgia from competing for the whole thing.
615-737-1025. Trevor Maddich, brought to you by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters. Trevor saying this could be the year that the Bulldogs could win it all. We'll get into some more SEC talk. Buy or sell. I'll tell Trevor a few SEC bold predictions. He'll tell me if he is buying it or selling it. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Get your calls, get your texts in for Trevor. We'll be answering your questions through the end of the hour. You're listening to Stillman and Company live on 102.5 The Game. Hey, Ian. You are listening to Stillman & Company, and we are live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. Caroline Fenton joined in studio by ESPN college football analyst Trevor Maddich. Now, Trev, you and I were chatting at the break, and I asked you if you're going to be traveling to any college football games this season, what ESPN's college football plan is for travel. But you mentioned that there may be a few more COVID scares than ESPN anticipated so far this season.
The thing that worries me, Caroline, is that college students... their brains aren't fully developed yet, which is a legitimately true thing.
Right, the 18-year-old kids.
The part of your brain that governs judgment is called the prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm told by brain doctors that is not fully developed until you get into your 23, 24, that kind of a thing. Now, you add alcohol to the mix, and
I'm sure there's a good bit of that.
Numbs the prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got college football players whose judgment is not fully formed, who may numb their judgment even further, who think that because they're vaccinated, they're safe. And the director of the CDC has said that you can still get COVID with the vaccination. Now, there's reasons why she says the vaccination is better than not being vaccinated, but you can still carry the virus. And so if you've got college football players that go out to some mosh pit off campus thinking they're safe because they're vaccinated, and then they come back into the locker room, they could spread it around to vaccinated and non-vaccinated players and coaches. And the next thing you know, this year, they're talking about forfeiting games, not rescheduling games like they did last year.
Which could be the difference between SEC championships, playoff berths, beyond that.
Absolutely could.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see how college football players respond to what they think is full protection from the vaccines, because according to the director of the CDC, it protects you against some things, but you shouldn't consider yourself immune to getting any problems at all.
Something that definitely shook up college football last year, but something that this year Greg Sankey has said there will be zero tolerance for it. Like you mentioned, if there's a COVID outbreak, that's a forfeited game, similar to the NFL. The Pac-12 recently came out and said, forfeit. If you have a COVID issue, it's a forfeiture.
Yeah, and the NFL is really strict about it as well.
Very strict about there's a zero tolerance policy.
I think they saw last year they did what they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And last year there was a lot of bending over backwards. I mean, you had NFL games that were postponed a week and then another week and then they played it on Tuesday, that kind of a thing. And then they had to reschedule other games, and it was just a giant hair-pulling experience. But nobody knew what to expect, and I think everybody did the best they could. And I think the view of the powers that be that are making these decisions is that, okay, now that we have a vaccine, now that we have the ability to, in some ways, minimize or at least limit the problems with COVID, if you're smart on top of it, we're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt anymore if you're stupid.
And with that, we will get into a little game of SEC buy or sell. So I will tell Trevor a bold prediction or maybe a storyline surrounding SEC football this season, and he will tell me if he's buying it or selling it based on the information that we all know. So we'll get into that now. First and foremost, Trevor, are you buying or selling this? Texas A&M will beat Alabama in the regular season.
Oh, I'm selling that. Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely selling that.
Why?
Yeah. Well, both teams will have really stout defenses. It should be a low-scoring game.
Mm-hmm.
We know who's going to play quarterback at Alabama. We've seen him. We know he's going to be pretty good. That's Bryce Young. There's still some question as to how good the quarterback position will perform at Texas A&M. That, and even though they've got a fantastic running back in Isaiah Spiller, I mean, one of the best in the country.
Who was the projected Heisman Trophy winner for Texas A&M by ESPN.com.
And worthy of that.
Yeah.
But they've got to replace, I think it's 3 offensive linemen. And so the question is, will those guys come up and play well enough to really enable Spiller to do everything he can do? And if there's one thing Nick Saban can do on defense, that is to create a scenario that really seriously messes with offensive linemen that aren't quite yet gelled into a cohesive group of 5. So I just think that the questions that both teams have, I think it favors Alabama to be able to exploit A&M's questions even more than A&M exploiting Alabama's.
Next one, Georgia and Alabama both make the college football playoff. Buy or sell?
I think that's a fair possibility. That's a fair possibility. Now, what happens in the Big 12 and the Pac-12 matter. If Oklahoma wins out, they'll be in, or Iowa State, right? If the Pac-12 champion wins out, they'll be in. That takes away a spot for that second SEC team.
And you're looking at Ohio State and Clemson most likely being in the conversation as well.
Yes. But then Clemson is what's interesting to me because they open against Georgia. So let's say that Georgia beats Clemson.
Week 1 could be the deciding factor for the rest of the season.
So let's game plan it out. Let's say that Georgia beats Clemson in the opener, which that game's, I don't know what the line is. It's a toss-up. Then they sweep the rest of the season and lose a close one to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Well, Alabama's in. How do you keep Georgia out?
But are you going to take a one-loss Clemson in the regular season to Georgia over a Georgia team that went undefeated up until the SEC championship? If I'm on the committee, I'm picking Georgia.
And what worries me, Caroline, is that you're not on the committee.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
There's been too many times over the years that the college football playoff has been in existence that head-to-head wasn't the most important thing to the committee. If Georgia beats Clemson, then loses to Alabama, and Clemson wins out, Clemson then is a one-loss ACC champ who lost to a great team in the opener, right, with a fresh new quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, and so they might put them in because they're conference champs. But then that head-to-head is there. That head-to-head has to matter. And that's one of the reasons I think Georgia would have a chance. But again, if the Pac-12 and the Big 12 have compelling conference champs, one conference having 2 teams in is going to be hard to have happen.
Next one for you. Kentucky finishes second behind Georgia in the SEC East.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. The question is, who else is ready? South Carolina has too many questions, too many guys
Florida,
transferred out.
I think, would be that one school to plug in that second spot. But it always feels like it's Georgia and Florida battling for that number 1 spot in the East. I just don't think Florida's there this year.
You know what? I agree with you, and you said it more kindly than I do. I will. I don't think Florida is going to be Florida this year.
No.
And if they are, I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. But last year, Florida had 3 guys.
Kyle Trask, Kadarius Toney, Kyle Pitts.
That's it. So quarterback, tight end that nobody can cover, and wide receiver that nobody could cover that also ran jet sweeps that nobody could stop, right? Their running game was pedestrian at best. Their defense, with all the talent that they had, ended up being one of the worst defenses statistically in the SEC in a lot of important categories, including pass defense. And so I don't know how they get better by losing those 3 guys until now. Emory Jones is the quarterback coming in. He was super highly recruited. By all accounts, he's really good, and I hope he proves me wrong. I hope they do. But right now, I think that Kentucky has more coming back that I trust than Florida does. Now, ask me again in October.
So do you think that if Kentucky does finish second in the East, is it more so Kentucky being good or Florida just not being Florida? Or is it a little bit of both?
No, it's a combination of both. Kentucky has built real strength on the offensive line and the defensive front. I mean, the first-round draft choice of the Washington football team last year was a guy named Jamin Davis, who was a linebacker for Kentucky. Guy's about 6'3", about 230 pounds with the speed of a wide receiver. They've got dudes on the defense that can disrupt. And on the offense, they've developed a real pattern, a real tradition there of really big offensive linemen and powerful running backs. And at quarterback, with Will Levis being named the starter, the interesting thing about that is he's a former Penn State guy that won the job against some really good contenders, including Joey Gatewood, who transferred out of Auburn to go to Kentucky. Gatewood, I think, figured that he would have the chance to start there because he could throw the ball down the field better than they've been able to do over the last several years. But here comes transfer from Penn State, and beats them out, right? And so I think that competition meant that whoever started at quarterback was going to be an upgrade in the passing game for Kentucky. I just think Kentucky's going to be sneaky good. Not Georgia good, but beat Florida good? Yeah.
I'll keep it in the SEC East on this one. Now, everyone is talking about Josh Heupel's high-powered offense, talking about the quarterback battle, the wide receiver battle happening in Knoxville. But I want to ask you about Tennessee's running game. So buy or sell on this. Tennessee running back Dee Beckwith, who has been compared to Derrick Henry, which is pretty high remarks. Tennessee running back Dee Beckwith becomes the next Alvin Kamara.
Okay, did you have any idea that Alvin Kamara was going to be Alvin Kamara while he was playing in
Tennessee?
Tennessee?
Not while he was playing Tennessee.
Nope.
I think a lot of players that come out of Tennessee thrive in the NFL and didn't really do much in Knoxville.
Right, and the same way with receivers a while ago at LSU. Odell Beckham Jr., right? Landry. Guys that came into the NFL unheralded publicly became superstars in the NFL. And Alvin Kamara, I had no idea he was this. Then he goes to the Saints in his first year. He's the offensive rookie of the year, right? So there you go. I think that he has a chance to be that guy, certainly in that role. And there's two reasons. One is that Heupel understands that he's got to get the ball to people that can play, and he can play. But second of all, in the passing game, the offensive line needs to show that it can protect the passer. Last year, it really struggled. This year, 2 of their 5-star recruits that came in originally are gone. They've transferred out. So now, how will this offensive line be? And if Joe Milton's the starting quarterback, then you've got a quarterback that's not very mobile. You're going to need to throw that ball to the running back a lot. And so he's going to get a lot of opportunities to show that he can be that guy.
That is going to do it for us today. Trevor Maddich joining us in studio. We'll be back at 2 tomorrow with your Bucks Titans coverage. ESPN Radio is up next.